So it's my pleasure to now introduce Christine Bianchen. She's an external member of the board and the chair of CAVA. She is also the deputy principal at Hopwood Hall College and the University Centre across its campuses in Rochdale and Middleton, Greater Manchester. It is now time to hand over to Christine. To you, Christine.
So welcome everyone to CAVA's annual conference, and a particular special mention to new members from Boston College who joined CAVA for the 23-24 academic year, as well as prospective members who are joining us online today. Okay, next slide. So I'm pleased to introduce the theme for this year's conference as EdTech Opportunities for Access to HE. This feels like a really exciting time in further education, with more and more emerging technologies at our fingertips, from the use of VR and AR to platforms utilising AI to assist teachers, AI that can generate individualised content and assessment for students. I mean, the technology out there is emerging so fast. I don't know about the rest of you, but it makes my head spin sometimes. At my college, we're really fortunate enough to have an amazing VR suite. And one of the things we've been doing recently is looking at supporting students with exams. Many of our students struggle with the anatomy and physiology exam, whether they're sports students, nursing, medical, or veterinary students. And one of the things we've been using VR for is to get all the kit on, and they can physically stand inside a heart and look around, look at the valves, look at the arteries. You can change the settings so that there's diseases, and you can actually physically see what happens to the different structures. You can also link what they're learning to the areas of the exam that they struggled with. And it's had a huge impact on the understanding and the outcomes and success in those exams. So we're now rolling that out across different exams across the college. But the difference it's seen to the students, where they can just go and stand inside an organ. I mean, it's amazing stuff. We've also recently been doing a lot on green construction apprentices. We're working particularly with hydrogen pipelines. Well, hydrogen pipes cost an absolute fortune. So we've developed a suite of technology where the students can put all the kit on. The member of staff stands there and demonstrates what they've got to do with their pipes. And the students can practice over and over again with the hydrogen piping without any of the risk involved and without it costing hundreds of thousands of pounds in kit. So the opportunities to use technology to practice is huge. The other thing we've been doing a lot of is students using the AR for interview techniques. So they can go in and do a physical interview with somebody, they can practice, and they get feedback not only on their response to questions, but also on body language and things like that. And the engagement with it across the college is absolutely brilliant. There's a lot of challenges around this. Actually generating the software and the stuff that goes with the kit is a big challenge for us, but there's a lot of companies out there working with us to develop it. And we say, this is the scenario we want, and they create it for us. I mean, it really is the future of education, and it's really exciting stuff. We've also been exploring the use of AI platforms to reduce teacher workload. We've heard a lot about chatbots, GPT, but there's a lot of software out there which can really help, particularly help with staff with generating content, whether it's PowerPoint, schemes of learning, smart targets. It does coaching, it does emails to parents, it even does marking, which everyone gets really excited about. But we've got to approach that carefully to make sure we still have that human input to it. But the opportunities around the future of FE are just mind-blowing. It also brings huge opportunities for individualized learning, platforms that can adapt content and assessment to an individual student's needs and their progress. So the opportunities to support the most disadvantaged are huge. Also, obviously, opportunities around online and distance learning. All of this does come with its challenges, but we as a sector are going to have to embrace this. And I'm going to really enjoy exploring all of this throughout our conference today. And I'd like to particularly thank all of our amazing guest speakers and panel members for joining us today. And I know we're all going to really enjoy the day. Next slide, please. I'm coming to the end of my term as chair of CAVA, and I would like to say a huge thank you to Flora and the amazing team at CAVA for all that they do in supporting our members and our students. As you can see from our mission, we really do make a difference and we change lives. The bit that always gets me is together we're committed to aiding social mobility by increasing the opportunities for people from all backgrounds to study at university. CAVA really does live that mission, and we make a huge difference. Access to HE has never been more important in supporting the most disadvantaged students into education and successful careers. Next slide, please. Can we have the next slide, please? Oh, I lost Georgia now. Oh. Technical difficulties. Shall I carry on while Georgia catches up? So we've been through so much in the past 3 years, not least the impacts of the pandemic. I want to just remind us all that collectively in 2020, we estimated the grades of over 4,000 students so they could gain their qualifications, and that was no mean feat. We've had changes to QAA requirements, qualification reforms, but we've not only weathered that storm at CAVA, we've come out stronger. We were congratulated by the QAA for our proactive approach in response to our extraordinary regulatory framework during the pandemic. Through CAVA COVID grants, we distributed over £63,000 to the CAVA community, supporting 725 additional teaching hours, 87 digital devices, Wi-Fi dongles, specialist software, wellbeing support, and additional resources to our students. CAVA really is a values-driven organisation, and as a member of the board, I'm so proud to see how students are genuinely at the heart of decision-making. Over the last few years, it's been great to see how CAVA has strengthened our links with other AVAs to bring a collective voice in qualification reforms, influencing and shaping the future of access diplomas. And I really am proud to see how Flora and CAVA are leading the way. CAVA remains the third largest AVA in terms of student registrations. It's been a privilege working with the CAVA community. And as I said, we really do make a difference. It's an honour getting to meet so many of you and our amazing students, including celebrating success at our annual student awards, which is always one of the best parts of the conference, hearing our amazing student stories, and I look forward to that later on. Next slide, please. I'd like to take a moment to congratulate the CAVA community on our achievements over the past 3 years. We've consistently above national average each year for access to HE retention and achievement rates. CAVA has rolled out our new framework validation process to improve the quality of access to HE diplomas, while allowing providers to have flexibility in unit selection and creating bespoke pathways for students. CAVA has reviewed and improved the external moderation model to expand the breadth of subject experts supporting each of our providers and improve coordination between external moderators. Our CAVA community has formed 2 new working groups, the HEI Forum and Promotion and Recruitment Working Group. And thank you so much for all of you who are involved in those working groups. And we have welcomed 5 new members, so a special mention to our new members over the last 3 years. So Active Creative College, Boston College, Selby College, SMB College Group, and Somerset Skills and Learning. Next slide, please. I now have the pleasure of introducing Gavin Tash, who is the incoming CAVA chair, who's agreed to say a few words. So I will hand over to Gavin. I hope. Bear with us while we have a bit of a swap round.
Actually, Christine, it seems like Gavin may be having some internet problems this morning. Okay.
Well, I'm sure you'll all join me in welcoming Gavin, and you'll get to know him over the coming months. He's a current member of our board. He's our vice chair, and he'll be stepping up as chair of CAVA. So I leave you all in very good hands. Which just leaves me, next slide please, to welcome our next speaker, who you've just heard from, Flora Raffay, CEO and of CAVA, to provide a summary of 22-23 achievements and our plans for 23-24. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And I hope the magic of CAVA members swapping chairs throughout the day will become amusing to everyone. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning. It is wonderful to have so many of you with us for our virtual conference. The CAVA conference is really one of my key highlights of the year, as it allows us to come together as our CAVA community and learn about the key topics impacting access to HE and share our experiences with one another. And as Georgia covered just a few moments ago, we've got a really packed agenda for you today with our keynote speakers, our panel discussions, and our small group discussions. So I hope everyone will have something useful to take away from today. In the time allocated to me this morning, I'd really like to reflect with you on some of our achievements of the 22-23 academic year, our plans for 23-24 and beyond, and also to take a moment to go into a little bit more why we chose this topic of EdTech opportunities for access to HE for the conference today. So starting with the reflection, I would also like to just take a moment to thank Christine for her excellent leadership as our CAVA chair over the past few years. I've had the personal pleasure of working very closely with her during this time. She's been a wonderful support to me in our monthly one-to-one calls, because she has the unenviable role of also being my line manager. And I have really been struck by her unique combination of logical consideration and empathetic care throughout all this time. She has overseen what actually reflected on quite a turbulent period over the past few years with COVID and all the challenges that that brought. And I know that CAVA has benefited greatly from her steady chairship during this time. So I've noticed some people have already used some emojis. So if you could, either with emojis or just on the screen, join me in just clapping and thanking her for her time during this past few years. Oh, it's so great to see all the hands. Thank you, everyone. Brilliant. That's so wonderful to see. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. So what I'd like to spend a moment reflecting on as well are some of the challenges that we've had this past couple of years. So one of the key challenges, obviously, that we've all experienced is the cost of living crisis. And I know that this has not only impacted all of us personally and our institutions, but it has also had a significant impact on our students. And our students have had to weigh up whether to invest in their academic development or spend that time earning to provide for themselves and their families. And understandably, many have had to prioritize work over education. And as we're all aware, this has meant that there's been a decline in both pre-access and access to HE registrations in 22-23 compared to the previous academic years. From our data, we've noticed that this has hit predominantly our younger students aged about 20 to 29, where there's been the most significant decrease. And from speaking with you and speaking with students, it seems like that is the age group that's been hit most by the cost of living crisis. But despite the challenges that our students have faced, it is a real testament to you all that, apologies, there we go, that despite the significant challenge, the dedication that you have had and the hard work you've put in as educators has meant that we have had incredible student outcomes across this past year. So during these challenges across the 22-23 academic year, retention actually increased to 80%, and there was an average of 98% of pass rates across our students and 36% ABB plus grades, which is a fantastic achievement for all of the students. And a whole total of 90% of students then progressed on to either further study at FE or HE, or went into employment immediately after their studies, which is an incredible accomplishment. As you can see on the slide, our pre-access students that progressed on to access to HE did even better, just showing how great that qualification is getting students ready for level 3 study. So they had an average of 83% retention rate, 100% pass rate, and 41% ABB plus grades on their access to HE diploma. I'm also pleased to share that not only have they achieved positive outcomes, but they also really enjoyed their course. So 97% of students in their end of year feedback said that the course met their educational goals, and the same number said that they would recommend the course to their family and friends. I'd also like to highlight another key achievement, which was our record low level of appeals in 22-23. In total, over the summer of 23, we received only 8 appeals. And the reason I stress this is because I'm aware that alongside marking, moderating, and signing off access to HE diplomas in July, many of you are under considerable pressure to complete assessment and report grades for BTECs with incredibly tight timelines this year. So it's even more impressive that you are able to accomplish all of that whilst ensuring the best possible outcomes for our access to HE students. So really, on behalf of the entire CAVA team, I just want to take another moment to thank you and applaud you, all of our course tutors, pastoral tutors, internal moderators, external moderators, exams officers, quality officers, support staff, and everyone else at all of our member institutions for all of the hard work you put in to enable this to happen. So again, wherever you're watching from, I see the hands coming in. Do applaud yourselves. This is, again, a huge accomplishment. So I will also clap with the emojis. Fantastic. Oh, wow. There's some really excellent ones. Thank you, everyone. So I'd also like to take a moment to share some of the achievements that we achieved within the CAVA team. So as you'll be aware, we helped validate new centralized diplomas in creative arts, engineering, land-based studies, law and criminology, and music technology last year. And we also updated and revalidated our suite of HE study skills shared across all of our diplomas. We also, following consultation with you back in 21-22, this past year, we launched our new grade and student database with improved accessibility and functionality. And we also implemented our new external moderation model, having expanded the breadth of subject experts supporting our providers. And we're very pleased to have received very positive feedback from you about this at the end of last year. And so this has continued to be rolled out into this year. So we also expanded our events and engagement opportunities. So in 22-23, we held a total of 11 separate briefings and trainings, which was attended by a total of 592 delegates across CAVA members. We also held 2 Council of Members meetings and one-to-one meetings with each of our member representatives. We held 4 promotional and recruitment working groups to share good practice across our community. And if you're not part of this, please do join. They're a wonderful way that we have been sharing good practice for recruitment and retention. And from this, we've created access to HE marketing personas to help marketing teams with targeting students. We've gathered a lot of new case studies, and we're also able to update our new recruitment and retention handbook. And just so you're aware, that will be shared with you in the emails after the meeting so that you're able to just share in those good practice and see how you might be able to apply it for yourselves. We also had 2 wonderful HEI forum meetings with our HEI members, and this has led to us creating an FAQ document for HEI admissions teams about access, which we've been sending out prior to the end of each academic year to help with any clearing questions admissions teams might have. And the HEI forum also helped input into some of the QA's proposed regulatory changes to make sure that university perspective was taken into account. I'm also, speaking of QAA, very pleased to share that CAVA continues to be deemed low risk by QAA based on our engagement in the cyclical monitoring activities that we have to report to QAA on. Across this past year, we are also very pleased to be able to take part in QA's consultations and several working groups to help shape the revisions to the diploma specification and grading changes that will be taking effect from the 1st of August 24. And I'll touch on that in a moment as well. And it's great to see Rob Stroud from QA celebrating that. I can imagine he's probably sick of us by now, but it's good to have him with us today. And then something I'd like to share for those of you who attended our conference last year, you'll know that sustainability is a personal passion for me. And I'm delighted to share that CAVA has once again been carbon neutral this past year through a combination of efforts to reduce our emissions activities and also investment in carbon removal to offset any necessary emissions that we do have to have as an organization. And through the work that we did last year with you at our conference and subsequent meetings with members, we've also developed a roadmap to embedding sustainability into all of our access to HE diplomas. And I'll come back into this in a moment to tell you about what this will look like this year and in coming years. So turning now to this current year rather. A key focus, which won't be surprising for any of you, will be preparing for the QAA regulatory changes to the diploma specification, which, as I said, will come into effect from the 1st of August 24. Now, I know you will all have heard from us in many different channels since July to tell you what these changes are, but just to refresh everyone's memories, I thought I'd put it up just to remind us all. So the diploma specifications, each student will need to study at least a minimum of 1, 6, or 9 credit unit, and this will include graded or ungraded units. Each student will then be able to study a maximum of 30 credits made up of 6 or 9 credit units, which include both graded and ungraded units. And the final change from a diploma specification point of view is the introduction of a new national subject descriptor for nursing and health professions. And this will be piloted from August 24 and then fully rolled out in August 25. And the grading scheme changes, there will be a replacement of all 7 grade descriptors with 3 standard grading standards, which will be applied to all units and all assessments. And the other slight change within this is that grading standards will be applied at unit level upon completion of all unit learning outcomes rather than at assessment level, as it has been until now. So I am aware that a lot of work has already been undertaken this year by yourselves to get ready for these changes. We've been working with all of our course teams during this first term to explore the diploma specification changes. And I know the vast majority of you will be looking at unit choice changes or minor modifications to break up larger units to help bring you, especially within that limit of the 30 credits of 6 to 9 credit units. And we will continue to work closely with you, especially those of you who deliver health professions and health and social care, to align those diplomas to the essential elements of the new national subject descriptor. And we'll be working towards a revalidation with you in March 24, which will include the addition of new mandatory units to achieve that QAA kite mark ready for the pilot in 24. And on behalf of the whole team, I'd like to sincerely thank all of you for your engagement in this first term in preparing for these changes. It's been really appreciated how active you've been and taken part in those conversations, so we can be ready for this change by next year. Over the coming months, as we move into the new calendar year, we'll be moving our attention to the new grading standards, and we'll be running a series of subject-specific standardization events with you in February to further explore the implications and review required adjustments to assessment plans and briefs ahead of the new year. So Georgia did mention our monthly newsletter in her introduction, and so I'd like to ask you to please keep an eye on that and make sure you're up to date with it, because all of the dates and registration details for these events will be shared in the newsletter. The other focus for this coming year, will be the QAA's planned consultations regarding their licensing arrangements with AVAs and releasing further information about potential international equivalent of the Access to HE diploma. I know Rob will touch on this in a moment, but we'll keep you posted about this as more information becomes available. Now, moving on, we will also be continuing our usual services and development this year. So we will be revalidating centralized diploma frameworks for criminal justice and policing, construction and the built environment, and hospitality and tourism this year. So if you are interested in any of those, please do get in touch with us and we can involve you in that process. We've also renewed our partnership with NOCN for this year to continue to jointly offer our level 2 pre-access qualification for those students who are not quite ready for level 3 study on the Access to HE diploma. We'll be running an information webinar about pre-access on the 11th of January. So if you're interested in finding out more, please do come along. The registration form will be shared in the email after the conference. And we will also be carrying on with our plans to embed sustainability. As I mentioned, this is something that we're all incredibly passionate about at CAVA. And so what we've already done is updated our provider approval processes to monitor providers' understanding and engagement in sustainability. And we are currently in the process of mapping all of our courses against the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs for short, and we'll be preparing enrichment resources to enable more of a holistic exploration of SDGs within all of our access to HE deployments moving forward. And finally, two things we're looking at around student experience. Firstly, this year we'll be moving into a pilot of electronic certification and transcripts with 2 of our colleges. We'll be testing out a new system in partnership with Hague Print and evaluating the effectiveness for our diplomas. Based on the success of the pilot this year, we'll be looking to roll out electronic certification in the years to come. And the intention of this is not only to reduce the environmental impact of certification and transcripts, but also to improve the verification of the certificates with external partners and improve the accessibility of certificates by our students. And I'm also very pleased to announce that we've negotiated 2 progression agreements for our students with Anglia Ruskin University and the University of Suffolk. And it's great to see Dale from Anglia Ruskin University celebrating that. All of our students that are registered on CAVA Access to HE diplomas will benefit from reduced entry requirements, guaranteed places or guaranteed interviews for admission in 24-25 and 25-26. All the terms and conditions of the progression agreements can be found on our website in the members area. So please do have a look and share these opportunities with your students. For any other of our university partners present, we are open to exploring further agreements. So please do get in touch if you'd like to have that conversation with me. So our final main focus for this year will be looking to the future. And this will be our new cycle of strategic planning for 24-27. And our vision for CAVA continues to be that we should be the best AVA. And so we've benefited from consultancy support from MBA students at the University of Manchester this past term, who have helped create an objective criteria for defining what that best looks like and recommendations for CAVA to take forward to achieve this goal. And we'll also be consulting with our community of Council of Members next week to explore further what you think we should do. So please do come with your suggestions and recommendations. And this will build on consultations we've already done with the CAVA board, our Quality and Academic Development Committee, our HEI Forum, and our Promotion and Recruitment Working Group. So it is sincerely our hope that we'll be able to take all of your great advice and feedback to make a strategy that really meets your needs for the 3 years to come. What is very clear from the conversation so far is what role education, technology and education will play, especially over the coming years. So in 23-24, it's expected that artificial intelligence tools and technologies will continue to develop and become even more integrated in all spheres of our life. And this has really inspired our conference topic for today. So I would just like to take a final couple of moments to reflect on the importance of EdTech for access to HE diplomas. So I think the key focus for us at CAVA is very much not just taking the opportunities that these technologies give us to improve teaching and learning experiences for both students and course teams, but it's also about making sure that we're preparing students for life beyond education by exposing them to new technologies and tools that are quickly becoming central to everything that we do. So we've chosen to focus on 2 aspects of EdTech in this conference. Firstly, artificial intelligence and online delivery. So looking at artificial intelligence, this is something we are still exploring as a team, and I know everyone here will be exploring in some levels already. It has so much potential to improve accessibility of information, to provide much more personalized support for students, and also help with generating interactive content that both improves students' ability to engage, but also, as Christine mentioned, help reduce the workload for our course teams. And so what we see is really important with artificial intelligence is to support our students to use it in a responsible and appropriate way so that it enhances their learning rather than replacing it. And we also recognize that there are potential harmful limitations and that this should be part of our conversation with students so they understand where some of the biases and limitations might come in so that they can use it in an informed way. So I'm very pleased that we'll have our keynote, Ben Wishker, talking about this, and then our panel of experts from FE and HE this morning to really help us get into the depth of how this can work and what the best ways forward are. Moving on to online delivery. As we all know, online delivery has been growing in popularity at least over the past 20 years, and it really hit its peak during the pandemic. At CAVA, the majority of our courses do currently run with some level of blended delivery, for example, with 1 day a week delivered online. And we've also got 7 providers who are validated to run fully online access to HE diplomas. So this is a really exciting area for us to develop, especially as new tools like AI, AR, VR, and all the acronyms start to come into play to really help enhance that learning and provide more skills and tools for our students. Again, as with AI, there are limitations of this, and I want us to bear in mind the high levels of digital poverty and lack of digital skills that are barriers for many of our students. So recent data out of the Digital Poverty Alliance estimates that about 1.7 million households are offline in the UK. So it's important that as we move forward with online delivery, we do it in an accessible and inclusive way so that our students can, again, benefit from it rather than feel excluded from education. Now, in the final minute or so that I have, I just want to encourage us to take a specific mindset to this conference. I want us to make sure that we keep an open mind so that we can truly explore these technologies rather than just paying lip service to them. I think we're a really key turning point, similar to when personal computers were first introduced to the mass market. And if you'll indulge me, a personal anecdote, a family member of mine recently shared a story with me about when his workplace first got a computer in the early 1980s. And at the time, the company CEO went out and proudly bought the IBM personal computer, and he brought it back to the office, and to show off how high-tech the company was, he promptly put it in a glass display case, put it in the center of his office, and anytime anyone came to visit, he would show off and boast what an amazing company they were because they were embracing technology. And my family member was hired to be the official computer coder that was on hand to code up any solutions for any staff requests that they might have. And in the 4 years he worked at that job, not a single person ever asked him to code anything. They just had the computer in its little display case and did nothing with it. So I share the story not to sort of mock the past, but to highlight the importance of taking time to understand new technologies so that we can truly appreciate its potential and relevance for our work. Developing an EdTech solution doesn't have any value if all we do is display it in its shiny case and talk about how innovative we are with having it. Assigning a sole member of staff to manage EdTech in isolation will not have an impact. We all need to make sure we have a shared foundation of understanding so that we can all bring our individual expertise and knowledge from our roles to deeply consider the value and transformative nature of these technologies. So I invite you to keep this story in mind as we delve into the conference talks today. Let's take AI and online out of their shiny display cases and think about how we can use them to evolve and improve access to HE for our students and our institutions. So thank you so very much for listening to me. And I'm now pleased to introduce our first speaker, Rob Stroud from the QAA. So Rob is the Director of Assessment Services and Access to HE at QAA. He's previously held roles at the OFS, HEFCE, and has experience in student protection, the regulation of independent providers, teaching and funding policy, the design of operation of student number controls, and a background in student experience, policy, and practice. So just a reminder, if you have any questions for Rob during his speech, please put them in the chat and we'll ask them if we get time. Thank you very much, and I'll hand over to Rob.
Well, many thanks, Flora. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Looks like it, so that's good. Many thanks really for having me today. As Flora said, I'm Rob Stroud. That was my sort of bio and introduction that she sort of ably gave there. So thanks very much for that. I thought it'd be interesting just to start by saying, so I'm Director of Assessment Services and Access to HE at QAA, which means I have the really interesting role of within QAA, both managing the newest things that we do, which are our new assessment services activities that we offer for HE providers in England, with also the oldest thing that we do, which is actually access to HE, which is part of our company objects and is something that we took on when we were formed in 1997. And I would say that there's not much in QAA that is still the same things that we were doing in 1997. So we're really proud of our role in relation to access and delighted to be continuing to support it. And as I go through today, hopefully I'll set out some more things about how we are going to be supporting access as we go forward. Thanks to Flora and all of her team for inviting me today. I had the pleasure of visiting them in the summer, which seems like only yesterday, although the weather outside tells me something different. Apparently it's still -1 here at the moment. It's really great in that session that Flora handled there to hear about all the achievements that CAVA providers and your students are achieving, and long may that continue. That's certainly something that we're really delighted to hear from QA's perspective. I think you've put together a really interesting agenda for today. I'm going to split my presentation into 2 parts. Firstly, a general overview of what's going on with access from QAA's perspective, and then also I'll move on to adding some thoughts on AI, as I know that's going to be discussed a lot more throughout the day. So if we move that one on, there we go. So I thought I'd start with a bit of looking back and reflecting from our perspective on what's gone on this year, a bit like Flora just did. This year has been really, really important because actually it's the beginning of a significant period of change for access that will probably be going on for the next couple of years. So what's been happening? Well, at the start of the year, we were starting to undertake a review of our regulatory arrangements. This was following some very clear feedback given to us by AVAs at the end of 2022 about how we can help the qualification by changing some of our practices. And we're still working on that. And I'm going to mention that quite a lot throughout. Also, as you know, and as Flora mentioned, we were busy looking at the feedback we received on the consultation that we launched last November on the diploma specification and the grading scheme. And thanks to the many people across the sector who engaged with that, I'm sure many of you here on the call did. So in the spring and summer of this year, a lot of change has been happening. Now, firstly, the Access team moved in QAA's structure into my new assessment services and Access to HE directorate. That gives actually Access a lot more prominence within our organisation. Up until this point, Access was in what was known as our International and Professional Services Directorate. You'll notice that didn't even have access in the name. So actually, when we were looking at a strategic reconfiguration of QAA earlier this year, we really wanted to sort of elevate the position of access and make sure that it was clear where it sat. Also for QAA this spring, in April, we published our new strategy. I'll say a bit more on that in a moment, but that has implications for access. And I really wanted to highlight today how the threads from our strategy follow through into what we're going to be doing in the access space. You'll know that sort of in the summer, we started to get the grading scheme and the diploma specification out of the door, which was a big task from my colleague Anne Granger. Hopefully you found it all useful in terms of the documentation we've produced on that so far. And obviously that was followed in early autumn by the nursing and health profession subject descriptor. We've also been beavering away behind the scenes on the development of a new set of arrangements for an international version of the diploma. I know Flora mentioned that earlier. Again, I'll say a bit more about that in a moment as part of our ambition. This autumn, we've started to see more change in the access team as we begin, we're implementing more obvious changes. We've been joined by a new Access to HE diploma manager, Charlotte Collard. I know that many of you will probably have engaged with our previous access manager, Julie Misen, who left us in the spring. And obviously we're wishing Julie well in what she's up to now. We've also been within the team starting to reform the roles of the existing staff members and bringing on board some new staff. And we're just about to enter into some reforms for the Access Recognition and Licensing Committee, the ARLC. So that's our governing committee within QAA that sort of oversees the arrangements. And there is the possibility, subject to board approval, that for the first time there could be members who have direct experience of being a representative of an AVA on that committee. So what we're really starting to do there is lay the groundwork for making sure that Access and its governance arrangements and its management arrangements are fit for the future. So moving on to the future, looking ahead to 2024. So for 2024, as Flora mentioned, we intend to launch a major consultation on the underpinning regulatory arrangements for access to HE. So this is going to be a significant change because many of the existing requirements, the things that actually providers may not see as much, but certainly our AVA colleagues see, they've been around and in place for more than a decade. It's what informs many of the requirements that we place, for example, around moderation, around practices in terms of requirements of things we have to have submitted to us in relation to monitoring. So AVAs are going to feel those changes once we've consulted on them and began to implement them, but we think it'll also have an impact on providers as we move into the 24-25 academic year and beyond. I'm hoping you're all looking at this on a large enough screen to see the small writing that's in the green boxes on the arrow there. But I thought it's just helpful, you know, in terms of what we're really trying to think through as we develop these changes, is we know that we set these requirements at the very beginning of the process through our licensing agreement, our licensing criteria, the DIP spec and the grading scheme, although I should just make sure that you're all assured that we're not planning any more significant changes to the DIP spec or the grading scheme. There may be some small consequential amendments where references no longer link up, but there are no big changes planned to that. But those requirements then move on to the AVA setting the requirements onto you, so CAVA setting their requirements that ensure that they comply with both the licensing arrangements we have with them, but also to ensure that they can fulfill their own strategic aims and also their own administrative functions. Obviously, it's important that they are actually able to do the things like moderation and certification and all of those things. And obviously with you guys, a lot of you as providers having the direct relationship with students, you know, you're really that important interface between, you know, the qualification and the student. And we're really grateful for all the hard work that you do. And I love coming to conferences and events like this because I often hear, you know, about the sort of ways that you've been able to positively impact on students' lives and sort of change their lives and improve their experience. But obviously you then as providers are starting to feel that you're complying with both the AVA's requirements, which are then a mixture of QAA and the AVA zone. So what we're going to see, we're making quite a lot of change at the very start of that, or we're going to propose to make a lot of change at the start of that chain, and then it will filter through. So particularly one of the things that we'll be looking at is going to be the data requirements and the things that we ask for to enable us to do monitoring of the activity. Interestingly, it's really helpful to hear from Flora about some of the things that clearly from her presentation you're already looking at and monitoring within CAVA and within CAVA providers, and it's great to hear that that's being sort of shared around the providers in the way that Flora has. That's exactly the sort of thing that we're sort of going to be looking at a bit more in the future. So why are we doing this? I've sort of set out, yes, you know, okay, yes, we're going to change lots of stuff, but why? So first of all, we've taken the opportunity, as I said, to reposition access within QAA's operational structure, but also we're also reframing, I think, a bit about how we think about access and how it aligns with QAA's strategy. There are three aspects of QAA's strategy that are particularly relevant to what we're doing in access. First of all, we've set out a new clear articulation of QAA's role in relation to standards, including making sure that we are securing the value of qualifications. We've been regulating access, as I said, for 26 years now, and we really want to support access going forward into the future. And that means continuing to make sure that our work is at the forefront of securing the value of access as it goes forward, making sure that over time we adapt, we amend, we update where necessary. Also, international is increasingly important to us. And interestingly, I'm actually traveling abroad tomorrow to a country where they have expressed a particular interest in pre-higher education qualifications. There's great opportunities, I think, out there, and I'm starting to hear this more and more about providers and agencies abroad that are interested in, well, what can they do to increasingly engage with UK higher education, but preparing their own students locally. So the international element is really, really important. QAA's strategy in that regard is very much about expanding our international activity and capitalising on the reputation of UK HE and QAA, and crucially we've updated a lot of the wording in our strategy to talk more broadly about UK tertiary education, not just higher education. So really working with FE colleges as well as higher education institutions, which has obviously traditionally been QAA's domain, but making sure that we are working to support all of the sector in the tertiary space with regard to higher education and access. And also assurance and enhancement. One of the things when I came into Access in the last year I was really, really surprised about is the level actually of specificity of some of the things that we require from AVAs, that then AVAs require from you with regard to certain hoops you have to jump through with regard to access. And I'm conscious that maybe some of that hasn't quite kept pace with practice elsewhere in the sector. And so we want to look at making sure that the approaches that we take to quality assurance and making sure that quality assurance is taking place within Access are relevant, up to date, and ultimately respected and ideally innovative as well. So what does this mean in practice? Well, as I said, the existing regulatory arrangements for Access has been quite static for a long time. There have been a few tweaks here and there with some of the things around monitoring, but actually the underlying requirements and criteria have been very, very similar. So we need to ensure that Access maintains its place, particularly because of all the changes that we're seeing happening in the level 3 landscape. We see there being new opportunities for Access. I've mentioned internationally, but also domestically as well, particularly in England, where the higher education sector is now, if you look at the number of providers registered with the Office for Students, the higher education regulator, we're looking at around 420 different providers just in England alone that are now registered higher education providers. And I'm really interested to start working with a much broader group of providers to get them to understand what the Access to HE diploma is and how they can start thinking about how they might accept students from that diploma. We know that at the moment there are a lot of providers, HE providers, that have been supported for Access for many, many years, and we're very, very grateful to them. But we're also conscious that there are still some providers, particularly in the independent sector, that don't really know about what Access is, and we need to do a bit more, I think, to get that message across, and we can support you and AVAs in all of that. As I said earlier, our existing regulatory approach is based on quite a highly specified rules-based system. Increasingly, I think, and we've been doing some sort of analysis internally about this, we think that this adds burden. It prevents resource, not just within ourselves, but also, I suspect, in AVAs and then out into providers being utilised on innovation and growth within the qualification. As I said, we're really keen to support the qualification and see it grow and develop and flourish even further. But we recognise to do that, it'd be really helpful if we start to get some of the barriers that we may have inadvertently placed a decade ago out of the way to make sure that it's relevant for today's context, particularly in looking at how the education sector is changing and indeed has changed quite significantly post-COVID. So what's the ambition for Access? Well, hopefully you've heard from me here then, and you're feeling confident that QAA is standing firm behind the Access to HE diploma. Our organisational changes are sort of an obvious and almost tangible evidence of the commitment we have to the qualification. We know that obviously there are changes taking place in the FE sector, a lot of the government reforms, and obviously it remains to see what happens the other side of a general election, what continues to change or revert potentially in that space. But we really want to make sure that Access maintains its value and status and make sure that it's seen as a complementary part of that whole level 3 landscape. We think that, because the needs of HE providers are changing, and indeed the diversity of HE providers is sort of growing, we need to ensure that Access develops in that space, because that's going to help meet the needs of a wider group of learners in the future. So our regulatory changes that we will introduce in 2024 through consultation will lay a solid foundation, hopefully, for growth and innovation domestically and internationally. I won't go over those points again. We also recognise, and I think it was really important that, Flora mentioned this as well with regards to cost of living, the wider economic environment. There's a challenging environment out there at the moment. That's not just affecting the students, it's affecting you as providers and also the AVAs that we work with as well. So we need to make sure that the regulatory regime is adaptable to balance the cost and burden that we place with space for innovation and opportunity. And if you take anything away from what I've talked about in terms of change here, it is about innovation and an opportunity. That's what we are looking for in the future. And we're really keen through both the consultation exercise, but also through an ongoing programme of engagement that we are sort of developing more and more. We sort of started earlier this year with me sort of engaging more with AVAs. We want to hear more and more feedback from AVAs and providers about how things are on the ground, so that we can look at things that we might need to change. So what will this mean for you? I'll cover this very quickly. Thankfully, initially, very little. You'll all be pleased to hear, because you think, oh my goodness, lots of change. What do I have to do? Well, initially, very little. Obviously, the diploma spec and the grading scheme are rolling out in 2024, and Flora and the team there will sort of help guide you through that. So we will launch a consultation in 2024. We had hoped to have it out in autumn of 2023, but actually we've decided that there's much more that we want to do with it, and so we're taking longer to try and get that right and put out something that's useful. We encourage providers to look at that as well as AVAs in terms of what you think the impact might be on you. Once we start to implement that change, so probably in the 24-25 academic year, and maybe you'll invite me back next year, Flora, to come and explain what we're doing at that point. You may, as providers, start to see changes in what information we collect and need and how we engage with AVAs. Once the changes are implemented, what we're hoping for, though, is a lighter touch regulatory regime with fewer highly specific rules and some more general principles instead. We believe this is going to allow AVAs to work with providers with more freedom to develop and innovate, creating new courses, trialing innovative practice within those courses, and doing all of the things that you're going to want to do to enable your students to flourish and succeed. We also think this is going to release resource in QAA. We're not looking to increase our costs significantly. So I'm looking at a defined sort of resource envelope. So I'm looking at how do we best utilize that to support the sector at a strategic level with the promotion of access in a way that actually we probably don't currently have the capacity to do so. So I just want to conclude this part before I say some brief things about AI with just a big thank you to everyone. We are so grateful to everyone working with Access and with Access students for your continued support and engagement with the diploma. It makes such a difference to the lives of many students each year. It's one of the things that I really love hearing about is about student successes and things that are really going positively for them on the qualification. So in the remaining time that I've got, I've been asked to sort of speak a bit about AI and online delivery. I'm going to focus more on the AI side of things because that's somewhere where QAA has been focusing quite a lot in this last year. So the reason and what I've tried to do here is I've looked ahead to the rest of the agenda for the day, which looks really interesting. And so I'm going to try and hopefully set a bit of groundwork for some of those future discussions that you're going to have in what will no doubt be some very stimulating conversations later on. Move that one on. So in our view, the story so far on AI, there was a sudden surge in interest this year because of the sudden prominence of ChatGPT right at the very sort of turn of the year from 2022 into 2023. Obviously, they're not the only AI game in town. Google Bard, Microsoft Copilot, all coming along, and a myriad of other tools that other software developers are creating. Interestingly, what we saw a lot in the very early part of the year was a response significantly focused on academic integrity. The, oh my gosh, students are going to cheat. on assessments, on assignments, if they've got access to all of these AI tools. But we've been focusing on delving a little deeper, and the questions that the AI throws up are actually about course and assessment design, pedagogy, and different ways of delivery. And I think actually, if, you know, the next slide hopefully is indicative of this. Actually, once you start to really think through the AI and its implications, those are the areas that you'll get into. So QAA has been collating resources and convening the HE sector to address these issues. We'll be continuing to do so. And obviously, one of the things that I noted, I was at the AOC conference recently, as I'm sure many of you were. I do think the landscape could get a little more complicated on this, because there is a lot of crossover now, and this was really evident by some of the people speaking at the AOC conference about the crossover between data analytics, which people will be doing quite a while, and AI as well. So we're going to see, I think, some quite interesting sort of developments in that space over the next couple of years. I've stolen this slide from my colleague Eve Alcock, our Director of Public Affairs. She's actually in Berlin at the moment presenting this very same thing at a conference there. And this is a sort of journey that we think that people are going from. And I think if you look at this, I won't read out all the steps on the slide, but actually you might think that actually both within your institution may be at a certain point on this curve. And we expect that actually individual members of staff and indeed students will be at different places on this curve as well. And so I think it's really interesting as a model to just look at and think, okay, well, where are we? Where are we going? And when do we want to be there in terms of these different stages? I think, you know, hopefully by now, after, you know, hearing about all of the AI issues for a year and AI challenges for a year, people are at the very least starting to get to that low dip point there of acceptance of, I should probably adapt to this. And certainly with the agenda that you've got ahead of you in the conference today, that will give you a great opportunity to think about how you can move through that cycle. So what's QAA been doing? So we've been providing guidance for higher education institutions. We've got, we had a webinar series that took place in sort of March and April this year. All of this is freely available on the QAA website. That was the best attended webinars that QAA has ever run in its entire history, which really shows, I think, the level of interest. Had for the very first one, which was simply called ChatGPT, to ban or not to ban, we had almost 1,000 people from all around the world signing up to hear about that. So if you've not, if you want to learn perhaps a bit more about AI, it's worth sort of perhaps delving into those. They're worth a look. Obviously, don't do it today because you're paying full attention to this conference. But you know, maybe at some other time over a lunch break, you know, tune into some of that sort of thing. We're also doing a lot of policy engagement with government at the moment. So we, for example, have engaged with, I was recently speaking with one of the all-party parliamentary groups on data analytics, which again, that was very interesting that the data analytics people wanted to talk about AI in assessment. Our membership services, so any of the FE colleges here today that are members of QAA can access some specific things exclusively for our members. And we're also curating a range of guidance, a couple of examples there on the right-hand side. So we've been giving responses to the DFE, but also giving advice on developing sustainable assessment strategies. That one's a really, really good one because it looks at different forms of assessment and how that might need to adapt. So I'll conclude with a few sort of assumptions and principles of where we think we've got to after, you know, quite an intensive 10 or 11 months of work on this. It's becoming very, very clear. Students are going to need to have critical AI literacy skills for the labour market. Detection tools, if you're looking at assessment, academic integrity, they cannot be relied upon solely because the tools are increasingly getting better every single time. You know, there's a significant jump between the free version of ChatGPT, which anyone can get access to, and the version that you have to pay about £10–20 a month for. They are really, really good. I mean, really, really convincing in terms of what they can produce. And as you can see there, so generative AI is only going to become more sophisticated, but also more integrated into our day-to-day. There's now a thing that just appeared in my Microsoft Windows the other day, where I can press a button on a PDF now and ask the Copilot to basically analyze that PDF and tell me what's in it and give me 200 words on it. That's just seemingly something that that's being rolled out, that's freely available. All of these things, think about the impact that might have when students are looking in the future, for example, at academic literature. All of these things are important questions. So our good practice and guidance, I'm conscious I've got a minute left, so I will rattle through this, but like I say, have a look at the resources that are freely available on our website. There's a link right at the very bottom of our homepage, so qaa.ac.uk for ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. We really think it's important for providers to think about developing strategies to improve digital and critical AI literacy among staff and students. I thought it was great that Flora mentioned earlier, though, the point about digital poverty. And I think that's where certainly with Access and with the sort of prominent types of providers that are offering Access, who know their students so well, it means that hopefully you'll be able to develop strategies that really meet those needs of those students based on their individual context. There isn't a one size fits all for this. Need to communicate expectations to students really transparently, but also engage and partner with students and staff to design what is going to be authentic assessment in the age of generative AI. Really promote academic integrity, and that's really important, I think, particularly for the Access diploma, because it is all about preparing students for higher level study. So getting those academic integrity principles drilled in at an early stage is really important. And obviously stay agile and share good practice, which means keep an eye on what is frequently happening and changing. So I'll conclude here. I know you've got, like I say, a full agenda sort of packed with this sort of stuff later in the day. Here are some of the barriers and outstanding questions that we at QAA see. How do you do some of this at scale? How do you upskill staff and students? How do we move people along that curve that I showed in the slide earlier? And some questions here that may or may not be answered in some of your later sessions, but I expect you'll come up with many more. I will stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions if there is any time for me to take any questions.
Thank you, Rob. I think you've timed it perfectly to the minute, so I don't think we've got any time right now. But if anyone does have any questions, please pop it in the chat, and hopefully, Rob, you can stay with us for a few minutes to answer them. Perfect. Well, thank you very much. If I can now hand over to Emily, our Deputy CEO, who will introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Flora. Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome Ben Whitaker, Director of EduFuturists. Ben is a former education senior leader who now works with businesses, educators, and not-for-profits to wander about, question, and explore ideas. He hosts the EduFuturist podcast, which explores where education might be going. He also presents regularly, both nationally and internationally, on technology, particularly on the adoption of AI in education. Just as a reminder, if you have any questions for Ben, please put them in the chat, and if there's time at the end, we will ask them. I will now pass over to Ben.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can see me on screen now. If you're not, you can certainly see my slides on screen. And if you can, then that's all fantastic. So I'm really pleased to be joining you today. Thank you very much for the invite. I know that when you put a keynote title that looks like that, it's gonna set some tongues wagging, some brains going, and where is he going to go with this? But I'll do my very best to make it less dramatic than that title implies. So. Just to give you a bit of an insight to me, I know that I have just had a brief introduction there, but this is me. That is an AI-generated image of me, by the way, using a program called Midjourney. So I uploaded an image of myself and asked it to create it in a futuristic design with a little bit of glitch and with a cityscape background. I also managed to take some bits out of that by magic erasing it. So it is that is where we're going now. We're not talking about examples here of AI design, but one of my most exciting elements is how we can use AI, artificial intelligence, in the design of effective curriculum, and then how we can make it look beautiful in the same way. So I am a former assistant principal and teacher. I run a podcast, as just been mentioned. We've been talking about this argument around, or discussion around, the future of education for the last 6 years, just over 6 years, and that's evolved. We were talking about AI about 2.5 years ago, and about how it could help with the personalization of learning. And then just yesterday, obviously, ChatGPT had its first birthday, and lots of people were celebrating it. I think it even got its own little Google Doodle at some point in some places, and ultimately, ChatGPT and the associated things like Rob was talking about earlier are changing the way that we do what we do, and it's certainly asking lots of questions about curriculum design and assessment and where we go. I now work a lot with businesses and education settings and non-profits as well, around generating ideas and thinking around ideas. And some of the big things around that are how we integrate technology. And increasingly in the last 12 to 18 months, that has been how we use AI. Now, I'm not intending to be an AI expert here. I don't think there is such a thing, by the way. If anybody considers themselves to be an AI expert and they are not working in AI development full time, then I would suggest that these people are not who they say they are, and perhaps ask them if they have any snake oil to go with it. Sam Altman, some of you will realise last weekend or the weekend before, there was a topsy-turvy conversation about Sam Altman being sacked by OpenAI. Then there was a big campaign to bring him back. He then got a job for Microsoft, who are 49% shareholders in OpenAI, who own ChatGPT or created ChatGPT, and now he's back as the CEO. So actually, when I created these slides the first time, it said CEO, then I had to change it to former CEO, and now I had to delete the word former from that. But he says this about AI. He says the version of AI we see now is the dumbest version we will ever see. And that makes most of us who play around with this stuff quite, I think the word is scared, but also apprehensive and maybe a little bit anxious. And one of the elements that sits with that is this thought process that what happens if AI becomes what some people are calling as general artificial intelligence, not or artificial general intelligence, AGI, not generative AI, like we're talking about creating brilliant indistinguishable from original content essays and lesson plans and curriculum ideas and blog posts that look like they are written by a human and actually are written by a machine. If that's the dumbest version we have now, where's it going to go and what's it going to do? I think it's an exciting time, but it's also a very, very a time where we need to be cautious and thoughtful, and I'm grateful that organisations like CAVA are trying to help us navigate this, and it's become a theme in the conference today. So he says it's the dumbest version we'll ever see, but this man said a few things a few years ago, well before Sam Altman was talking about artificial intelligence, and he says it's not the strongest of the species that survive, and we know this. You've probably all quoted this, you've probably all used this in some way or another, and if you don't remember it directly, probably in your biology lessons way back when, maybe you're writing on chalkboards at that point, I don't know, depends how old you are. But he says that it's not about being the most intelligent or the strongest. It's the one that's the most adaptable to change. And in the age of AI, I actually believe that the most important thing that we are doing in our curriculum design and our assessment design, and also in our teaching and our support of students, is making sure that we are creating spaces and are developing learners who are adaptable to change. This ability to pivot, this ability to be flexible, this ability to think that just because a curriculum has been like this way for as long as it has, it can't stay that way forever. And I know we have to go through processes and proof and checks and balances and moderation, but the things are moving probably faster than we've known before. I certainly have, in this 20 years in education, I don't think I've ever seen a year like the last year in terms of pace of change and things as having to adapt and pivot so quickly. Even, and I would argue the time of going through online learning through the pandemic, from an adapting to change for education, I do believe that this last 12 months has been significant in that. So in order to be able to help us navigate this space, I just want to talk through a couple of things to set the scene, and then I'm going to give you some thoughts about what I would suggest for how we survive, and talk about how we can use AI in assessment, in access, in the opportunities for our curriculums. And the first one is, and this is taken from Vijay Govindarajan's great book called The 3-Box Model. He talks about how every organization, whether that's a business, an education space, when he's talking, or whatever the organization is, we need to use a 3-box model in the way that we work. And the first box is what do we do and how do we optimize what we are currently doing to make it more efficient, more effective, have the biggest impact. So I've kind of explained that in box 1 is about optimizing the current system. So our current programs that we are offering, our current access programs that we're offering, or full curriculum offer, what do we need to do to optimize it? Could that be that we need to streamline some things? Is it that we need to use technology to help us do some things quickly, and then give us more time for the delivery of facilitation and discussion and questions with students? As a teacher as a former religious studies teacher, philosophy teacher, I loved the idea that technology could take away some of the elements of my curriculum delivery. So I might create videos around this that I have students asking questions around it. So in 2014, 2015, when I was working in a sixth form, the conversation at that point was, here's a YouTube video, some questions that go with it, and a Google form generally. But that was optimizing it so that my time in the classroom, because I've done that as a flipped piece, my time in the classroom could be optimized, and I could then sit and chat and like we would expect, I suppose. So the first thing is about optimizing this current education system. So how can AI help us do things better than that or more efficiently than we've done before? The second box, box number 2, Govindarajan talks about what things do we need to let go of, and or what things do we need to stop doing because they've served the old system, but they fail the new, or they fuel the current system, but they fail the new. The new system, whether we like it or not, and some people would like to bury their heads in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist. Whether we like it or not, the age of AI is well and truly upon us, and we have absolutely no way to put that genie back in the box. When OpenAI came out, and when ChatGPT came out in November 2022, the first response from lots of states and countries and organizations was to ban it. Let's stop it. Let's not do it. And I understand that, because we needed to get some restrictions in place and guidance and to support people, but we couldn't do that full time, full stop. So what we have to do now in that space, the New York states that banned it in schools very, very quickly reversed that ban and acknowledged that we need to embrace where we are, but within certain guidelines and parameters. And I'm not saying a free-for-all, let's all use AI and it's solved all our problems. What I'm suggesting is, what are some of the old values and practices that have fueled this system that will not survive in the future one, in this space where the learners have got access to AI? And whether you might say, well, we'll just ban, we won't let them use ChatGPT, or we won't let them use Board, or we'll run it through a plagiarism checker. And as Rob said earlier, the plagiarism checkers are not worth the money, that are not worth the the paper they're written on, In the Age of AI, because of the way, and I'm happy to talk about this later on in questions or in panels or whatever else, because of the way that AI generates content. It's not copying from anywhere. So it's not AI stuff is not plagiarized directly and copy and pasted from one place. So there is no way to detect it. Or easily anyway. So we've got to let go of these values. What things do we need to let go of? And so what are we doing in our access programs or in our broader curriculum programs and assessment programs that we need to let go of? And some of that may well be difficult. And I think box 2 is the hardest of the lot because it served us well. But the worst things to hear in an education setting, and it's not just an education setting, but when you ask somebody, why do we do this? And the answer back is, this is the way we've always done it. And that's a challenge, isn't it? Because if that's the reason why we do something, that's not necessarily the right way to go. If that's just because we've always done it that way. An old friend of my dad's used to say, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And that's all right, but it doesn't really ring true anymore because the world has changed. So if you do the same things, you're not always going to get the same results because the world has changed. So the playing field has changed. But box 3 is the exciting bit, really, which most of us love to think about as innovators in this space. Is we want to create a future that serves the needs of learners and the world. So this is what could we do if we had more time, if we had more ideas, more finance, and we've freed up some of that from taking some stuff out of box 2 and also making some efficiencies in box 1. So it's not like pie in the sky, blue sky thinking that all these consultants come in and charge a fortune to tell you. It's like about creating a future that serves the needs of the learners in the world. It's this, what's the future we want to create? What would an access program that would serve the future needs of our learners in the world, what would it look like? So that's the premise of it. But a lot of text on that screen. I don't like seeing lots of text on slides, but I'm going to take make an exception for this. And on this crazy website called 1KG, which some of you may have heard of or seen, they made a really good point. And I think this idea in this world where one university is preparing students for the world of work, where they encourage the use of digital tools, including AI, and the design and assessments that encourage the creative use of those tools, and another is seeking to restrict them and say, we're going to stay within this regulatory framework, it must stay this way. I'm not saying throw it all out, but this is what the statement is saying. Question is, in a place of choice, in a world of choice, where students have got the option between that university or that HE provision and this HE provision, which do you think the students will choose? And that's where we are. Because I've said this before, you might want to say ChatGPT or Bard, they aren't going to be able to, they're not going to be able to be used. Well, how many of you are aware that on every young person's phone that has Snapchat, there is an AI bot built in at the top of every single one of their friends feed, which is called Snapchat My AI, where they can ask the questions directly within Snapchat, not going into a new program, not logging in with a new account, literally where our young people are when they're asking questions. And not just young people now, increasingly there's an older demographic moving into Snapchat as well, is that you can ask an AI questions from directly within your Snapchat. That is, most people don't, most teachers, I'm making a presumption, most teachers do not understand that is happening. I saw a thumbs up come up, but it's not common to know that Snapchat have got an AI chatbot within their app. So Eliezer Yudkowsky says, by far the greatest danger of AI is that we conclude that we understand it. So I said that about AI experts. So we can't say, all right, yeah, we understand ChatGPT and it's done now, because it's just improving all the time. Creating your own GPTs in ChatGPT was announced just a few weeks ago, about being able to create your own chatbot type models within ChatGPT. The ability to then upload images and it will read those images. So complex brain diagrams, and it can explain what's going on and give you an oversight. A diagram with some data, or sorry, a file with some data that it can ask it to analyze. And just like Rob mentioned earlier there, like Copilot, it's now not just having to go out somewhere, it's where you are. So Microsoft Copilot will allow you to have interaction and AI interaction within the tools that you are using. That is increasingly going to become the case. Now, some of you will know Dan Fitzpatrick. Dan is one of the co-hosts on the EduFuturist podcast with me. We've been friends for a long time. My claim to fame is that I was one of his learning mentors when he became a teacher. So he came to the school that I worked at, and we've been friends for a long time. And he's just recently updated his model of how to use AI as a teacher or as a bog standard user, but also we believe, and we've had lots and lots of conversations about this, this is how we could help students navigate the making sure that the prompts using ChatGPT or something similar could be you can get better output. So garbage in, garbage out, and it's perfectly the case when it comes to ChatGPT. And he suggests this prepare model, and he says that you need to give it a prompt. So you're writing and say, I want a schema learning about Plato's cave. And it'll give it that prompt, that simple prompt. Then you've got to give it a role, saying you're an expert philosophy teacher who has experience in problem-based learning or inquiry-based learning. And then you've got to give it some explicit instructions. I want it to be 6 lessons. I want it to cover assessment objectives, and I want it to cover X, Y, and Z. And then some parameters that go from that. So I want you to display this in a table format, or I want this to be within 200 words, or I want this to be split into 15-minute chunks. And then these next 3 are, so it used to be just a prep model, and now he's added these ARE elements. So he actually says that in the text that you put into any ChatGPT or Bard or any of these other products, you should ask it questions like, what else do you need to know from me to be able to give you that answer? So it's a chatbot. The intention is it's supposed to be talked to. So you can then ask that, and then you can ask it to rate its experience and what it's put out. Is the stuff, was it difficult to find it? Did it find what it needed? What else would be useful in that conversation? And then most people think artificial intelligence can't have emotions, but you can ask it for an emotional response to some of the things that it's given to, and ask it to have an emotional element to what is being outputted. Now, once somebody's then got a schema learning, or they've got an essay or whatever else they're going to get, that isn't the end goal. And most people who use these kind of AI tools tend to stop there, and they don't think about editing or working with the output that's come out, and they think, that's a little bit rubbish. They didn't really give me what I asked for, or I click regenerate, so it'll do it again. But actually, what we need to do when an output comes out is, and this is my model, I believe that we need to chat with it. The intention of ChatGPT, the first 4 letters are the clue, is that it's supposed to be a chat bot. It's supposed to be a chat program. It's supposed to be back and forth conversation. It's not just I put something in, it punts something out, then we're done. It's supposed to be chat. You're supposed to chat through it. So we need to do these things when an output comes out. We need to check it. Pretty simple. Every teacher should, before they put any materials in front of students, they're going to check what they've got and whether it's accurate, whether it is the kind of information that we would want them to see. Is it the right language, for example, or is it coming out in UK English, or has it got whatever else? So we've got to chat with it and check that first thing. Second thing, we need to highlight some elements. We need to highlight the elements of bias. I haven't got time to go into bias too much, but innately these models are male, pale, and stale. So they're trained on data that is predominantly made by old white men. And we have a responsibility as educators and people working in this space to ensure that we highlight bias, and we work towards addressing bias. And again, we could come up for that. But there's also, we can highlight some hallucinations. AI is well known for making statistics up and citations up because it's just the way that it's developed. It's not doing it intentionally or often, but we need to highlight those. Then from there, we need to assess the quality of what's come out. So I would encourage all students and I encourage all staff that we're assessing the quality of the written information. Are we assessing, does this give us what we are asking for? Has it met the prompt? Has it done what we need to do? And then from there, we need to, and this is the bit that I'm going to dig into for the last 5 or so minutes before we wrap together, which is this idea that we need to trace the use of ChatGPT throughout any work that we do. And it's not just ChatGPT, this isn't any AI, but I am referring to ChatGPT as the most famous one that is currently available. So we need to trace that. What do I mean by that? We need to trace and be very, very transparent about our use of it. Now, when I was doing my A-levels and when I was doing my degree and whatever else around that, the internet wasn't a normal thing. So I would go to a library and I'd get books and I'd reference those things and I'd read them and then I'd take bits out that were useful and then I'd put that in my bibliography, and that was the way that I worked. Then as we got a little bit older and I was working with students, this thing called Google came out, and students could Google things, and very, very quickly we had to put checks and balances in places because they were copy and pasting from one page to the next, or they were just using Wikipedia. Don't get me started on that. And then they would writing that off as their own. So, but we didn't check or trace the Google searches that got them to the answer that they had. What we did was we looked at a bibliography and a citations and resources and appendices, but there was no evidence of the kind of prompts that they'd use or the kind of questions that they'd ask. I'm proposing that in the age of AI, we need to build not just a set of assessments or a curriculum that is that uses and utilizes AI, but I absolutely do believe that. What I'm suggesting, the actual way to do this is that we need to be transparent in the use of the tools that we have helped us get to our answer. So I have proposed things like having your transcript of your ChatGPT discussion as an appendices in an assignment that's been submitted, so that a teacher can assess the quality of the brief that's been asked or the prompt that's been asked, but also see how the student has then responded to what ChatGPT has spat out. Now, that really, really moves us away from, we're not saying don't use AI. I'm saying you need to use that transparently and with integrity, because that's what we're all, we're trying to maintain the integrity of assessment and the authenticity of student work. So be transparent about it. I'm getting a few thumbs up and claps there, because I'm grateful for that, because I know that this is not necessarily what lots of people are talking about, but I think it's important. So how do we move to an assessment model or a curriculum model that that helps us to rethink this? The first thing I think we need to do is ask assessment questions that can't easily be ChatGPT'd or snap my AI'd. They're not actual words in the dictionary yet, but they might be soon. What kind of questions can we ask that aren't easily put into ChatGPT? Asking for students' response to things. If we had more time, I'd tell you about the example of my daughter. And in fact, I'm going to tell you, I'll make time for this. My daughter is 13 years old. She was at secondary school, and she was given a history assignment about exploring the importance of Edward VIII's abdication. So he abdicated because he fell in love with a woman who'd been divorced, Wallis Simpson. She asked ChatGPT to write that for her. I didn't encourage that. She just did as a 12-year-old in year 7 last year. And it came back with an answer. There were some words in it that were questionable. So she said to me, "Dad, what do you think about this?" And I said, "Well, it's quite obvious that it's written by an AI, because it says right at the top, certainly I can help you with this. And I think it's written in a way that doesn't sound like you." And she said, "Well, should I ask it to write like it's a 12-year-old?" And I was laughing. I was like, yes, this is the kind of questions this is how they're gaming the system. So she asked it to write it as a 12-year-old. I said, why don't you ask it to put some spelling mistakes in there as well for you? Because then the teacher will never know that it's been written by AI. I know it's a bit naughty, but we're playing around with it. And then she went into, I said, there's some words in there like divorcee and socialite. Do you understand what they mean? And she said, well, no, but I can Google that, can't I? And I said, of course you can. So she went and found the definitions. And then what she did is she transformed it. She took what was in there. She put these definitions that she'd learned, put them in her own words, and then submitted it. A teacher was none the wiser. And I was super proud that she'd worked with the AI. But my point of that was, it was super easy for her to ask the question of explain the significance of Edward VIII's abdication because of the way that the assessment was written. But what happened in my conversation with her was, as a teacher and as her dad, I didn't say, okay, that's the end of it. I said, okay, and I know she's privileged because she's got a dad that would ask her these type of questions, but I was saying, what do you think about this? And she said, what do you mean, what do I think? I said, do you think it's right that he had to abdicate? How do you feel about that? And then she started talking about her feelings on divorce and whether it was acceptable or not. Why should the king be held to a different account to what other people who are allowed to be divorced could do? Should that change? And then when the coronation happened just earlier this year, and I managed to have the conversation with her, and she said, Dad, I don't think it's very fair that Edward VIII wasn't had to abdicate because he fell in love with a divorcee, but Charles and Camilla were allowed to marry and they were divorced. So what had happened in my mind is that the learning opportunity had gone beyond repetition of facts. Okay, and I know I'm her dad, and so that's a very, very different way than what every learner's got. I know that is a privileged position, but I am conscious that is the way we go, that we need to perhaps think about things that aren't easily AI'd. Now, I'll quickly move through these, and I'm just going to put them all up on screen in one so you can see them. But I think we need to move towards and expect and suggest that AI might help our students in the ideation phase, developing ideas, coming up with stuff. It's going to do that. The initial things that they're expecting, AI can help with. But then we need to encourage learners to ask AI to help them improve their work. How could we ask them to do that? Could they upload their assignments and then the assessment criteria and say, what things could I do to improve this? And then that transparency use that I've mentioned about already. But from a staff perspective, building GPTs, which we could have a look at some other time, and if anybody wants to have a chat to me about that, I'm more than happy to speak about it. About these transformers, these chatbots, essentially that staff can use to help them with effective marking and feedback. But it all underpins on this idea of verbal justification. So explain like the conversation I had with my daughter there, a justification for the things beyond what is about repetition and knowledge retention and being able to regurgitate it into an assignment brief. Do they really learn it and understand it? So that's what I'm really moving towards. So I know we don't have time for Q&A now, but I am going to be sat on a panel later on, and we're going to be moving into some breakout rooms. But yeah, feel free to connect with me beyond here on some of the sources that are sat there, or if anybody's got any questions or ideas, feel free to ask me as the ideas guy. I don't like that phrase, but somebody help me brand it, the ideas guy. I'd love to talk with you. Sorry, I've run over a little bit, but hopefully that was something that you can take something from. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. That was so interesting to hear. I thought particularly the prepare and chat acronyms will be really useful if we want to harness AI to support us developing assessments this year to come in line with the revised specification and grading model. That would be a really useful tool. I also thought it was a lot of food for thought for us as we move into our breakout areas for discussion. So it's now time for our breakout rooms. A CAVA team member will be popping in to check on you. But if you need us, you can call us into the room. At the top of your screen, there'll be a prompt. Please click join to enter the discussion. At 11:35, we'll end the breakout rooms and bring you all back to the main room. Please feel free at that point to go off for a 10-minute comfort break. We'll be starting again at 11:45. Please be back promptly so we can start on time. Thank you.
Welcome back from your coffee break. I'm going to quickly introduce you to our AI panel. And just a reminder, if you have any questions for the panel, please put them in the chat. And if we get time, we will ask. On our panel today, we have 5 members. First is Ben Whitaker, our keynote speaker, who, as a reminder, is a former education senior leader who now works with businesses, educators, and non-for-profits to wonder about, question, and explore ideas. He hosts the EduFuturists podcast about where education might be heading. We're also joined by Sam Donovan, who is an Access to HE course leader at Truro and Penrith College, a CAVA lead external moderator, and a member of our Quality and Academic Development Committee. He has been working with artificial intelligence tools such as ChatGPT, Bard, Scholarcy, gaining a deep appreciation for the role they play in making education more accessible. We have Richard Buckley, the Digital Learning and Innovation Manager at Nottingham College. He has led the adoption of cutting-edge generative AI, developing important guidelines to enable teachers, trainers, assessors, and students to use the technology responsibly. He's also been involved in a sector-wide FE project focused on the fair and thoughtful integration of AI. We also have Dale Gregory, who is the Assistant Director of Student Recruitment at Anglia Ruskin University and is responsible for UK and Ireland admissions, schools and colleges, engagement outreach, and the Student Ambassador Program. Before working at ARU, he was in senior commercial roles across FMCG, automotive, and healthcare sectors. He is also a CAVA Council of Members representative for the university. And last but not least, we have Ollie Thornton, our student representative. Welcome, everyone. I'm now going to hand over to Georgia, who will run the session.
Thank you, Nock. Okay, hi everyone. Lovely to be back on screen. I'm going to jump straight in as Nock has just introduced our panel. I just want to ask, if you're not speaking on the panel today, if you actually don't mind turning your camera off, just to make sure our panel are up on everyone's screen and they can see the main people speaking. So let's get started. So our first question is, do you believe we should be teaching students about AI and how we approach it when it's and how do we approach it when it's constantly changing and we may not know that much about it? Richard, I'm going to come to you first for this one.
Hi, morning everyone. Yeah, let's go. It's quite an imposter syndrome moment for me after seeing everybody else on the panel, but you know, it's new to us all. I think, quite simply put, we need to teach all students about generative AI. Whether or not they use it is their choice. At Nottingham College, we're very clear about that. The use of it is an individual choice, but as an organisation, we have training and information in place both for staff and students around, firstly, what generative AI is, and secondly, what it does. So everyone in education, I feel, needs to be aware of it, even if they don't use it themselves, because they are going to be exposed to content which has been AI generated. So if we're thinking from a teaching point of view, they need to be able to see signs of work that has been generated in AI, to be aware of it, to have those conversations with the students. Students, I mean, outside of their time with us in education, need to be aware of what is, I mean, I'm going to put this in inverted commas, real content and what is AI generated. I mean, the boundaries are blurring even in sort of a year into this whole scale sort of adoption of generative AI. So we do need to be teaching students about it, absolutely. But how do we do this? How do we make sure this is successful in a field that is in such a state of flux and is kind of volatile? I mean, Ben made reference to the funding weekends ago with Sam Altman. Is he with OpenAI? Is he with Microsoft? And the effect that had sort of globally. I don't think that we cannot make people aware of it or start to plan to make people aware of it. So we need to be honest. We need to be clear. We need to be patient, and we need to be open-minded. It could well be a wonderful opportunity to learn things from our students as well. I don't think we need to be too precious about this. It is relatively new to us all, and I think as a collaborative and a cooperative learning experience, it lends itself very well to that. I think honesty is key, because we need to be honest about our own understanding and ability with the tools. So a little bit of vulnerability here, saying it's, you know, I don't know all the answers, but let's look together, I think is vital in creating, sort of strengthening our relationships with students, particularly in something like this. And sort of clarity of purpose. So that idea of clarity, everyone needs to know how we expect these tools to be used for the best advantage of the organization, and what, if any, consequences there are for misuse. We relatively quickly managed to produce and publish some guidelines for teachers, trainers, assessors, and for students. And in there, we made reference to, I know we're going to come on to this question later on, but we made reference to the student code of conduct and plagiarism. So we did that as a kind of a stopgap, just so there was some clarity that, you know, around our expectations of use. I think patience is really important as well in a field that is moving so quickly, and the developments are happening so quickly. I think just taking a breath and having the confidence to work with people as they get their heads around it puts us in a far better position, sort of going forward, for use of that. And it's kind of come out of nowhere in the last 12 or 18 months for the majority of people. I mean, it is literally a year ago, isn't it? So what's gone on in that 12 months is absolutely sort of mind-blowing with that. So how have we done that? We've offered CPD sessions to staff, and we have now got a module in our self-directed digital upskilling package for our students about generative AI. So all that stuff there, it clearly shows that, yes, we do need to be teaching them. How we do it, because everything's changing, is be clear in its purpose, be patient in people getting their head around it, be honest about your own understanding of it, and see how it develops. I think it is a collaborative experience, this. I don't think a approach of not teaching students about it is doing them anyone any favors at all, because we are moving into this sort of post-industrial AI enabled world. So sort of not
Richard. Completely agree. I think one of the things that has changed great in education is that people and educators are happy to say, actually, we don't know everything, and we are learning, and we want to support students, and we want to work with them. And I think this is a prime example of where we have to do that. So that was great. Dale, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree with all of those things, and I think in terms of the speed that things are working and not knowing, anyone that's seen a 2-year-old pick up a mobile phone, quickly go into apps and navigate their way through it will realize that this is not only here to stay, but it's going to move very fast. And our students' knowledge will probably outstrip our own very quickly. What I was going to say was that another reason I think it's important to embrace it in education is it's not just about the teaching and how we enable students to perhaps use it for their academic studies and their research, but also thinking about their future employment and their careers. So we run a number of courses where AI has become a big factor quite quickly. So medicine is a really good example where AI is making great grounds in a really positive way, and other health contexts. Scientific research is another area where, you know, it's being utilized really well, and engineering too. But what we've done is, even with our business courses, we've added AI as a module. And the reason for that is that businesses are very quickly in the current environment moving away from short-term economic gains within their strategies towards something which is much longer term in terms of sustainability, people's well-being, and so on. And AI can help them with some of those things, to develop those strategies, to learn from others, and to really build on that. So thinking about our business students and enabling them to use AI in a number of different ways, so that when they have qualified and they're looking for employability, they've got current up-to-date skills that will be useful within business, as well as other what I might call more obvious subject areas where you might use it.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Dale. Thank you so much for that. Ben, I'm going to throw it over to you. What else could you add to that going forward?
I think the answer would be almost for everybody unanimously that we must teach people about this, because if we don't, they're teaching themselves, and that misinformation and the risk of misinformation is very real. What I would say though is that what Richard was intimating at earlier was this idea of learning from students, and actually they are working in this world, and it's part of, like I talked about Snapchat, it's like part of a good number of students' world already. They're totally aware of it, or some are, but is there a way that we then not actually teach them, this is what ChatGPT is, and we think we're going in there, and the students are like, we were there 12 months ago. Like, the principle is, okay, how to use it, not what to use. So it's that principle around that. And I know we talked about that prepare and chat model earlier, and about effective use of it. So how do we teach them how to use it? I've been reluctant. I have done it to some extent with some organizations, but I've been reluctant to create AI policies, because I think an AI policy in and of itself, first of all, as soon as the ink is dry, it's out of date. But the guiding principles around it, there are some generic guiding principles about transparency and whatever else. But what I would say is that AI and digital full stop, I regularly say about this, everybody wants a digital strategy or an AI strategy or an AI, and I think it's not standalone. AI is part of our business development. AI needs to be part of our teaching and learning. It needs to be part of our assessment practice, our finance, our HR, how can we use it? So it's not an AI strategy or policy on its own. And certainly for students as well, it's the same principle. It's not about saying, here's AI on its own. It's about how AI feeds into and underpins and undergirds some of the stuff that we do. So that's how I would do it. I would do it as part of and a floor, as opposed to, here's an AI module, this is what we're going to talk about.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Ben. I'm going to ask Ollie now. We have a student representative. Ollie, how do you think that can be learning about AI from a student in the last couple of years?
Well, there's been very little on actually learning how to use the AI properly. We've certainly been told about avoiding it. Pretty much every policy at my university has been, if you try to use AI for any of your projects outside the realms of, let's say, collecting the data. So I do biological science, and I use multiple different softwares that track movement or behavior and mannerisms, and that collects the data for me, so I don't have to sit and watch 10, 20 hours worth of footage, which, has its pros and cons. It's not always accurate, but that's fine. But using something like ChatGPT to, write an essay, you find flaws immediately in the referencing. You find a lot of sources which have been completely misquoted and things like that, just because it had 3 words in the correct order that it needed. It will use that as a reference, and it's something totally irrelevant. So, AI like that aren't quite at the stage where they can be used properly, and that does obviously add to like a plagiarism element anyway. And educating people on these sorts of courses, on how the AI can be used correctly, incorrectly, that sort of thing, is probably more important potentially than actually teaching them to use it. Because I do think that, as someone was saying earlier, consequences is a big part of this. It's breach of code of conduct to not do something off your own back, basically. And if we're educating them on how to use these correctly, are we not putting a risk factor in there that they could learn to then develop their knowledge even further, use it for malpractice, in the sense of just not actually being aware of what's being written by the AI. So I think that is an awareness thing more than a use thing for the students. And again, there's a lot of software out there which are very helpful, depending on what you study. You see it in medicine, you do see it in science a lot. And if we didn't have them, then again, that would make it harder. So that's then where the educating side of it to use probably comes in more. I don't know if it's necessarily at the level of the access entrant courses. I do believe that they need to be aware of it to go into it at a later stage, but it is definitely something that the universities need to jump on sooner than later. And at the moment, it is just a blank sheet, don't use it. So, which is a problem with the same.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you, Ollie. it was great to be able to have a student on here to actually hear the opposite side. We don't always get to have that contribution. Okay, moving on to the second question. How would you suggest we adapt assessment methods so that we can follow suit and prepare Access to HE students for those higher educational assessments to the best of our abilities? Sam, I'm going to go to you for this one.
Okay, in terms of adapting assessments, I think we need to go back to more practical-driven coursework. I know when my network engineer or my networking module students are looking at configurations now, they can run issues with that configuration through tools like GPT, and it will help assist them in where those issues can be found. But then actually talking to them about it, understanding, well, how do you know this issue exists? What was the troubleshooting process you went through? I think we're going to see far more of that. Show me you know by telling me. Provide that actual evidence through debate, through presentation. I know through my own learners, I have a higher percentage of learners who want to progress into potentially teaching that subject in the future. We do a lot of almost mock lessons for our assessments where they present that information, and they can use tools like GPT to help provide frameworks for their lesson, because they're not trained educators. They have that practice of saying, well, this is what we could build, and then we can actually reflect on that after the fact and go, well, what worked well, what didn't work well. In terms of the wider practice of assessment methods, I think we need to move away potentially from just assessing everything through essays and through research papers. The ability to show knowledge, not just through the written ability to show knowledge, is a massive part of where some learners do struggle when they go to employment, when they go to those next level steps. They know it, but they can't show it. And that's really where I think GPT will change things, that we're going to get them to show it now.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Sam. Thank you. That reminded me of what Ben said in his speech earlier about talking with his daughter, and just really adjusting that type of questioning that we are asking. And now we know that students learn in different ways, and assessment should follow that. Ollie, over to you. What do you think around assessment? And I know you've said a few things with how your uni is doing it, but do you have any views on how assessment should be?
I think from an AI perspective, if we were to adapt to the university standard of assessment, we're looking at longer essays for 90% of subjects and things like that, which I don't think you have through the Access to Higher Education course as much. Don't get me wrong, there are essays, but they're not 8,500 word essays just for the sake of it, which is pretty much what most university is these days. And without giving them the element to do that as they go, throughout the Access course into the university, I think they are going to struggle. Using something like the AI would help them be able to put that together. It's use of a tool. There could be specific essays which are using like a ChatGPT software maybe, and adapting further on like that. I had a lot of mini assessments and things, again, with my Access to Higher Education course, which were good throughout it. I didn't realize that all of them were like, we call them summative at university, like definitively like added to your grade. We thought they were just mini assessments, and it turned out they were adding to grade, which is great from a stress perspective because you don't overthink it, but at the same time, it doesn't quite add to the reality of university in that perspective. I think it does bring it up to a standard, a similar standard to the other first years, but it's not quite to the standard that would be great. But there are loads of things that you can do to like help with assessment and other things as you go into university. Introducing them to referencing software is probably the most valuable one out there. I didn't even know it was a thing until I was in my second year at university, and it was all a bit new to me. Things like Zotero and EndNote, they are brilliant softwares that will help with assessment, because if you want to show someone how to reference properly, if there's a software out there which pretty much gets it right 95% of the time, and all you got to do is proofread it, that's going to teach people a lot quicker than freaking out over the fact they put 3 things in the wrong place in 10 of their references. Sometimes it's just better to have a definitive yes on using something to help you than no, we don't really know about this, so we can't advise it, which I think is becoming a problem with assessments, full stop.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. I've spoken to a lot of students in the past 6 months who have said a huge benefit of Access is it prepares them for the referencing side, unlike some of the other level 3 qualifications. And you're right, there are so many things out there to support with that. And that does give students so much stress. Why not introduce them to it and show them the tools? You wouldn't expect people to do things without a calculator. So it's about adapting. Thank you for that. So moving on to our last set question. If we do have time, I can see a few in the chat, but I have a feeling this one we may have a little bit of a discussion over. Do we think using AI is plagiarism? Yes or no? Ben, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
Okay, so you can imagine probably I'm going to be provocative and controversial. It's all right. It's the end of my part of the conference, so it's all good. Just kidding. The word plagiarism literally comes from the word meaning to kidnap, which I think is very, very interesting as a concept. I think the question of whether AI is plagiarism there's two elements to it. The first one is how tools like ChatGPT concoct an answer. The first thing, and I kind of intimated this in the presentation. And the second thing is about the games that we play. So in how tokenism works, and I'm not like an AI engineer expert, but the nature of how tokenistics works in AI is that when somebody puts a prompt in, it then tries to find probabilistically the right type of words that are going to link together based on the probabilities of how those words are used in different data sources across the internet. So it's never ever taking a chunk of information from one source and putting it out into another source. Therefore, the definition of plagiarism, which is copying and pasting something for your own, for the benefit and making it out as if it's your own, actually AI is not doing that. The plagiarism is where you then use that without doing any the chat and edit work that I was talking about earlier, and then taking that off as your own. So using AI by definition cannot be plagiarism, as in, or because it's not copying and pasting it from one place. If you then take it out of there and use it, then that is plagiarism. And I would always do the suggestion of that we need to chat with the information and make it our own, like I talked to you about with my daughter earlier. The second element is every game that we play has rules. And the great book, I don't know if anybody's read the book, The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And he talks about the idea of finite games versus infinite games. And he says that finite games are win and lose. This is the end point is completion of this. Playing a game of chess, it's win or lose. Whereas infinite games, and in education, I think we are absolutely playing an infinite game, which is that it's not an end. We're not trying to get to an end all the time. It's an evolving beast where the rules have to shift according to the way that the environment that the game is being played in. So I think when it comes to plagiarism in an infinite game or using AI in an infinite game, I think once on a day, we all used to cook our food using a fire outside. That's how we cooked our food. Before that, actually, we didn't cook the food, but then we decided we did fire and we cooked our food outside. Then we brought the fire inside, and we had ovens and stoves and all the things that go with it. And now we've got air fryers. Okay, so that's the evolution of where I don't know what it's going to look like next. My point about that is, we would suggest, or some people would suggest, that being able to cook something in an air fryer in 10 minutes that would have taken 2 hours or something similar on a fire is cheating. But it depends what your game is. If your game is to try and get food cooked in a certain way and as quickly as possible, then the answer is is it cheating? So are we lazy? Is it creating lazy people? Is it creating people that cheat or that do things the most efficient way? Well, let's all get our roadmaps out rather than using a sat nav then, because we use tools to help our lives become more efficient and easy. And I know it's not always perfect, and I know that I know I've gone into a philosophical concept, but I think plagiarism or cheating is because we're defining the rules of the game in the way that we are doing. So
yeah, that was great. Took me a bit by surprise, but I love it. I love the analogy. Dale, you put your hand up and I was going to come to you next anyway. Can you contribute?
Yeah, I agree with all that, Ben. And, there are lots of examples. The use of calculators nowadays. I mean, I and we were talking about this in our breakout room. I can remember you'd be whipped within an inch of your life if you picked up a calculator to do a sum. But, you know, nowadays you look at young students and they'll have a little calculator symbol where it says whether or not they're allowed to use the calculator when they're doing their homework online and so on. So I think there are lots of examples of these things. And I think it is about the rules and the understanding, and I think it is about fair education. I mean, plagiarism is one of those things that, you know, how far do you take it really? You know, we ask people to write an essay and we ask them to insert references. Is that plagiarism? Because actually you're going and looking at somebody else's work and you're using that to inform your work just because you put their name and the document reference at the bottom. Does that make it okay? And if that does make it okay, well, then maybe that's one of the rules that, you know, you use AI, use ChatGPT, whatever it is. And if you are gaining that information in that way, but in an efficient way, maybe you just need to reference it in the correct way so that you know in which way it's being used. This is one of those things that we could fight and we can come up with lots of reasons. And if we're not careful, the rules will become so strict that the game will become, how do you get around the rules as opposed to how do you work within them and use this to our benefit. So I think it's got a long way to go, but it's going to move very quickly. And it's how we embrace it and how we inform our students to use it in the right way, how we make rules that are workable, acceptable to everybody, and everybody knows where they are with it. And that's probably going to be our best bet for overcoming what we might refer to as plagiarism today. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale. That was great. Ollie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm going to be the opposite end of the spectrum with this one. I truly do believe that using something that writes an essay for you is cheating. I believe that that is the ultimate form of plagiarism, and I think it's producing lazy people. I think it's producing, you know, a generation of people who aren't willing to put the effort in. I'm heavily dyslexic and I struggle with reading, and I will sweat, cry, and God knows what else over trying to get an essay in and making sure that it's good. And don't get me wrong, it's taxing, especially for someone who does have these sorts of disabilities. However, the reward value, the ability to use your brain, the pathways that you develop over time, I'm going a bit sciencey here, but they are all massively valuable when it comes to these sorts of things. By enabling people to use an AI, which in essence does the work for you, and there is no way of denying that, you know, having ChatGPT write you an essay is getting AI to do it for you. You don't even need to read it. If you're smart enough to proofread it, you'll maybe get it through the plagiarism tests later on when it's going through the assessment and all that sort of thing. But a lot of people aren't going to do that. We've had a massive influx at the university of first years and second years, you know, a younger generation who potentially weren't raised with the same standards that some of us were. You know, they are looking to the easiest and quickest route of getting around stuff, especially in first year, because a lot of them don't care because they're young, and that's normal. That's just university. But you know, allowing them to use that sort of generative AI to write essays, it's just lazy. It's not teaching them anything. They gain absolutely nothing. There are other AI software out there that are helpful, like I've said, in science. We have Boris, we've got ID Tracker. You know, these literally monitor things and collect data for you. That's not laziness, that's time saving. And there's a very definitive difference there. It is. Having something write an essay that you've never read, what does that teach you? Have you learned anything that was on that essay? Or did you just show up to the lesson and get told to write an essay?
Thank you, Ollie. I think it's great to hear different perspectives. Ben, watching you is very entertaining through this. I'm very well close on time, and I do want to hear from Sam and Richard on the topic. I'm sure we can. Please feel free to keep putting to the chat the contribution. But Richard, I'll come to you next.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think we don't need to look at this as a binary. You know, I've heard a phrase, AI-jurism. So we're trying to bridge the gap between plagiarism and cheating using AI tools. So, I mean, something that I have come across that people might have is from a guy called Matt Miller, who is a fantastic sort of learning technologist. And he has something called a scale of cheating when it comes to AI. So it starts at one end where the work is 100% generated through an AI tool and submitted without any check, without any input other than the initial input by the student. And I think that's kind of where Ollie was alluding to there. And I don't think there's anybody who wouldn't agree that that's not acceptable. But at the other end of the scale, it's looking at 100% student created work with no tech input at all. And so it's this little bit in the middle that's the interesting and the complicated part. I mean, for me, some sort of semantics aside, I think the question should be, to what extent has the student used AI tools to produce the work they're submitting? If I've put it in the chat, and this is something that I believe quite passionately, if you are setting work at this level that can be 100% done by an AI tool, it's not the students that are at fault, it's your assessment. There's a lot of stuff here talking about project-based learning, more vocational stuff, that kind of thing. That's what we need to be doing. And the disruptive element of generative AI is coming across the entire sector, and there needs to be an open and honest discussion about the nature of formative assessment and summative assessment in education and what that looks like going forward. Just super quickly, I know there's other people talking. I'm getting quite passionate about this now. I'm sure you can see. I had a prime example of this. A teacher came to me and said, I've had someone submit something that's 100% AI. It's clear it's not their work. They've openly admitted it, which I think is a great thing because they had that conversation. But the teacher was like, I don't really want to sort of hammer the student because the tool is there. They've openly admitted this thing isn't what they like doing. So they've sort of done some kind of critical thinking. How can I do this? But I know, and again, backing up what Ollie says, I know they've not learned anything from this. So what do I do? So we looked, it was a written task. So we looked at how we could flip that. And in the end, we came up with a prompt that turned the AI tool into a personal assistant who was offering comment and input and direction onto the written work of the student. It wasn't offering rewrites, it was just offering a focus on spelling, punctuation, grammar, comment, tone, originality, that kind of thing. So using that, so the student is developing their own critical thinking skills. They are having direct input from an expert, but they are not relying solely on the AI tool to produce their work. So, and I think that fit quite nicely with the scale of cheating, the Matt Miller idea. I'll put a link in the chat to that because I think it is quite a powerful, it makes it clearer to me. It really made it clear with this idea of should we, shouldn't we, is it cheating, is it not cheating? And I think if used incorrectly, then yes, it is cheating. It is kind of plagiarism. I think that term is used because that's what we associate with and that's what we feel comfortable with. We know it's cheating, but we're not quite sure why. But then students are still being able to develop their own skills and knowledge in the subject. So yeah. Nice.
Yeah,
thanks.
No, that's great, Richard. Thank you so much. Sab, we are a bit over, but I do want to come to you to hear from you. We will adjust a tiny bit our lunch starting, so we will still get a breakout room after. But Sam, what are your views on it? I can see you've put a couple of things in the chat.
Absolutely. I personally believe that AI is not plagiarism. We can accept it, we can accept, reject, and ignore. If we reject or ignore it, they're still going to use it. If we accept it, embrace it, we're building that in. Where learners aren't showing their own evidence of understanding through the overuse of AI tool, that is then not an acceptable submission. But it's when we're looking at how we can actually build these assessment methods in, have these tools built into the assessment itself to allow them to actually show that more critical understanding, that I think is where the major benefits are going to be. I'd also like to flip it on its head to a degree. And look, I don't think it's cheating for educators to use AI. A lot of times we look at how learners are using this, but on the staff side, we're also seeing more use of AI to generate more engaging tools, but also more engaging lesson plans, more inclusive lesson plans. And I think if we're assessing our learners and we should be accepting of our learners' use of modern tools, I feel we should also accept it on our side to help reduce things like staff burnout and excessive workloads, especially in the face of things like Ofsted inspections. When we look at plagiarism as a rule, well, that is passing off someone else's work as your own. We have the ability to say, is this work yours? And if the learner fails to do that, that is simple malpractice. But it's when they are taking that learning, where they are taking that guidance from tools such as GPT, well, they're turning it into their own work. On the flip side, if we have people with accessibility needs, if they're using it to proofread their work and then give a review of, say, grammar and spelling checks. For example, for me, I'm still rubbish at the semicolon. It's a mystery for me half the time. If a tool like GPT proofreads a bit of work I'm submitting and says, oh, there should be a semicolon there, is it then not still my own work? I'm still getting assistance on that, and that's the purpose of these tools, is to assist us in our day-to-day life.
Thank you, Sam. I think everyone kind of nodded and agreed a semicolon. Who truly knows, hey? Okay, unfortunately, I know there's lots of things we could keep discussing. And I probably shouldn't have ended with that question, I feel like. But please feel free to use the chat. I'm going to pass back over to Nork now so we can go into breakout rooms. But over to Nork, thank you so much to all of you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was really great to hear all the different perspectives. We will now go into breakout rooms, and CAVA staff members will be popping in to check in on you. But if you need us, you can call us to the room. And at the top of the screen now, you will see there will be a prompt. Please click to join. At 12:35, we will end the breakout rooms and bring you back to the main room, and we will then take a 40-minute break for lunch. And we would like to ask you to please be back by 1:15 promptly to ensure we can start on time. Thank you.
Welcome back for lunch, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the morning session on AI. It's certainly been fascinating. This afternoon, we're switching back to our second topic of the day. I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Rachel Whitten. Rachel is the Curriculum Manager for Professional Services, Education and Training at Warrington and Vale Royal College. She is also an Associate of College's Research Further Scholar. Her research for her doctorate in education is based around hybrid and high flex delivery in FE. During the session, if you have any questions for Rachel, please put them in the chat, and if we get time, we will ask them. I'm now delighted to hand over to Rachel.
Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, so let me present my slides. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, so thank you so much for asking me to come and talk today to CAVA about my experiences of hybrid and high flex and online delivery, which I'm sure many of us all experienced during COVID. It's quite interesting. We didn't do any online delivery prior to COVID, but wow, how much have I learned since March 2020? So I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes sharing with you my experiences. Okay, so just change my slide. Sorry, 1 second. Having a slight tech issue myself. And it won't let me share. That's great. Okay, bear with me 1 second, please. Okay, there we are. Right. Okay. So who am I? So I'm Rachel Whitten. I've worked for 22 years. I was in teaching, learning and assessment at a Welsh college called Coleg Cambria. And I joined them originally as a work-based learning assessor. So I was out on the road for many years assessing work-based qualifications. Then I became a lecturer and I taught on learning and development programs. I moved to teacher training and coaching and mentoring, and a lot of staff development across our college. And there were 5 campuses, and there was quite a bit of travel in between them all. So I used to be on the road quite often in between campuses, working with lots of different staff members to teach and train them as teachers, assessors and internal quality assurers. It was a really exciting role, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I also liked being in the classroom too and teaching to an audience in the room. I left Coleg Cambria about a year ago, and I've moved to Warrington and Vale Royal College, and I've joined them now as a curriculum manager. So I now oversee a team of people teaching on quite a range of adult professional programs, which includes counselling, CIPD, leadership and management, to name a few. So our clientele are all adult learners, and the majority of them are in employment and are looking to further develop their career by coming on part-time programmes with Warrington and Vale. And the reason I think that I've been invited to talk to you today is because I'm currently doing a lot of research on hybrid and high flex delivery and online learning. Following the switch during COVID, we literally turned overnight to everything online. And I would say that my colleagues and myself at the time were very ill prepared for that. We literally just got the equipment, went home and started teaching. And I think where I'm at now, you know, 3 years down the line is how can we continue to grow and develop the teaching online experience for our students and add real value to what we're offering them. So defining what we're talking about in terms of online, remote, blended learning. So distance learning at my organisation has usually been sort of like identified as students and tutors that are not physically present in the traditional classroom setting together, and that the distance learning packages that we offered were very structured and didn't necessarily require a tutor to be available for the students. The experience that I have in terms of remote and blended learning, so many different terminology that we use for it. So we've got online, we've got virtual, we've got hybrid, blended. And I think there's a lot of confusion about the terms that we use. And it's really pinning down as to what is it exactly that we're offering to our students and what are their expectations and how are we going to deliver this learning to them. For me, it's all about being flexible and lending itself to the course that we're teaching online. So these terms are traditionally used sort of interchangeably. So high flex, buzzword, what do we mean by high flex? So hybrid is where we have our students that are in person and online at the same time. So the teacher is teaching face-to-face and online, but at different times. So we have our students where they log in at a specific time for that session, or they are face-to-face in the classroom at different times. And high flex is where we're offering that to both audiences at the same time. And I believe there's actually a real skill to delivering high flex. And having done it now for the past 3 years, there are so many things that we need to take into consideration for our learners. It's about flexibility. It's about saying to our students, you can either log in that day or you can come in person, either or. You decide and you tell me on the day what you want that to look like. And that's been quite interesting. So following COVID, a lot of the employers that I was working with at the time wouldn't allow their staff to come back. They had policies where they had to stay remote online learning for a period of time following the lockdown, whereas I had other employers that were desperate to get their staff back into the classroom. So we had to come up with a model where we could work with both audiences at the same time. At the time, I was working in a beautiful purpose-built business school with all high-tech equipment. Every room was kitted out. So we had, you know, all the facilities that you would need to facilitate high flex delivery. And it was really interesting that we offered students those choices to suit the ones that could come in or couldn't come in. Quite interesting, there was a lot of my NHS staff actually wanted to come back into the classroom. So it was on a daily basis that we would find out who was going to be coming in or not. And so as a tutor, I had to fit in around that demand. The students weren't told how they had to engage. They had that opportunity to make choice. And I think that was really, really important for our learners. So synchronous delivery. We talk about that real-time learning where the tutors and the learners are live online together, live lectures, live sessions, and there's a real classroom community to it. And then we have, in addition to that, the asynchronous way of delivery where we pre-record. I also did quite a lot of that to make my programs blended in between the sessions. So I would use a resource called Panopto, and I would pre-record a session over a set of slides and upload those. The beauty of HiFlex was that I was able to record all of the sessions. So if a student missed a session at any time, I could upload the recording where they had people online and in the classroom together interacting to feel that real experience, and go back and watch that recording so that they could catch up on any missed content. And we were still experiencing lots of students coming down still with COVID, unable to join because they were unwell. So the pre-recorded sessions are great because that offers self-pacing for the students. They can choose when they want to log in and engage with the material. So we had a whole range of things happening within our business school. Okay, so my experiences, and I'm just going to share with you the things that actually happened. So I remember pre-COVID being in the business school and members of staff all dialing in from different rooms, and it seemed like an awful lot of fun. And we were going, yeah, it works. Hey, we could see each other on screen. It was all really exciting. And then all of a sudden, we go into lockdown. I'm at home. I get this box delivered from the IT department with all my kit in. I was so uneducated around the tech that I actually had to have a colleague come on FaceTime and show me where to plug things in and how to set the equipment up. I was really fortunate that at the time I had this lovely little summer house in the garden, and I was able to take myself away from the family home and set myself up in that summer house as an office and be able to carry on teaching with little disruption from my household, who were all obviously in lockdown with me. And it did feel like a bit of a novelty at first. I was really excited about, could this work? Will the students still get the same experience? How could I make my sessions engaging? And how could I keep them entertained whilst we were all sat looking at a screen together? So it was about me thinking about how to bring my lessons to life and how to engage those students. And if I remember rightly, right back at the very beginning, our organisation didn't have the facility for chat rooms in the Google Meets, so it was really difficult to get them working in little groups together. That came a little bit later on into our delivery. I did have a lot of degree students at that time, who were young people who were almost forced to work from home, forced to study from home, and were, again, like us as tutors, were ill prepared for that experience. And I think they found it quite frustrating being, limited to the household, and everybody else in their house was also learning online or working online. So equipment, I think, was absolutely key. Not every household had laptop equipment or a permanent Wi-Fi connection. And I think as educators, we needed to take that into account, accessibility, and then being able to dial in on a suitable device with decent Wi-Fi that didn't drop out during the sessions, and be able to engage with the material that we were continuing to teach. These degree students, there was very high expectations of them to pass the course at the end of the academic year. They were on very, very strict deadlines. On some of my courses, for example, education and training and coaching and mentoring, I was able to be a lot more flexible about deadlines and able to delay aspects of the course. So things like micro teaches, we were able to put those off until everybody was back on site. So if we think about the expectations from the learners, did my learners expect me to teach it exactly the same as I would have if I was in the classroom still? I think it was really difficult. I think it brought about a new way of delivery for me. The setup that we had in the business school for topics like accountancy, for example, the tutors would use visualizers, which would help the students to be able to work out the sums and things mathematically live with the tutors. That was quite useful. I think in terms of kit for me, it's very different now, me teaching online from home than it was back then. I now have a fantastic purpose-built office set up just for that. But when I'm on site at Warrington and Vale, we've had to think about, the equipment. Originally, the cameras were set up at the back of the classroom. So tutors were standing on their own at the front with the screen and were presenting to an empty classroom with the camera focused on them. We've changed that, so we've now moved our cameras so that they're at the front of the classroom, so that they're capturing all of the students that are in the classroom as well as the ones that are online. So we create a Google Meet and people on screen can see people in the room and vice versa. So we've got much better interaction going on. Expectations still from the students. They wanted us to bring the lessons to life. They wanted it to be engaging. We had to consider putting regular breaks in for them, for students that really struggle to sit online for periods of time. And there were students that did not want to be on camera. So we had to write what I developed an etiquette guide to help create boundaries and rules around what we expected from the students as well. And I will touch again on safeguarding issues in a minute. So the students at that time, we didn't really know what their expectations were, but we knew what ours were as tutors. We wanted students to be there when the session started and logged in on time. So I would always encourage people to join a good 10 minutes earlier to make sure that their laptops, their cameras, the audio and everything was working for them. Quite a few tumbleweed moments while I was sat waiting for everybody to join. So I would put pre-tasks in the Google Classroom for people to read while they were waiting for everybody else to join. But logging in all on time, all at the same time, was an issue at times. The cameras on was really important for me because they were all adult learners, and it's very difficult to gauge engagement when everyone's got the cameras off. And we did, quite often suspect our students were off making a cup of tea instead of actually sitting and partaking in the session. And I use open questioning, and I would question and ask them to put the cameras back on and come off mute and answer the questions to try and draw them back in. There were many occasions where I would ask particular students and there was complete and utter silence. So it was quite obvious that they weren't where they should be, hence the cameras were off and they were on mute. So that was part of my etiquette guide as well, really, that we expected them to have their cameras on unless there was a real issue. Students could talk to me and tell me if there was a problem, which would be under safeguarding, and then we would give them permission not to have their cameras on. We had some really strange incidents during teaching online. We had one student who attended in his boxer shorts one day, not realizing he did have his camera on, and needed to have a chat with him about appropriateness. We had one student who went to the toilet and took the laptop with her with the camera on. That also was a very significant issue, and we had to have quite a serious conversation. I'm laughing, but I shouldn't be, about appropriateness too. But everybody was learning together, and that almost at the beginning felt like fun. I think we've become a lot better about how we conduct ourselves online. Part of my etiquette guide, so it was about being ready to learn. It was about them wanting to come to sessions and to engage and be part of that. So quite often I did use pre-course tasks. I would ask students, because of the feedback, to go on mute, but to use the little hand function when they wanted to come in and ask a question. And we fully encouraged engagement throughout. We just wanted the students to take part. I had a couple of students who said their cameras didn't work on a weekly basis, and they didn't seem particularly thrilled when I posted out some USB plug-in cameras for them. But we wanted them to be online with the rest of their group to enjoy, the teaching and the learning, and to be able to have that, that contact with other students. I think the saving grace for me was when we got Google Meets. So, we were working on Google Meets, but we had the chat room function. And to be able to put our students into those chat rooms and to get them engaging with each other. So I would pose a question or a topic or a dilemma and put them into groups randomly and get them working together and using Jamboard, which is part of the Google Suite, to record all their thoughts and to share back through the Google Classroom to the rest of the students what they'd discovered, what they'd come across. And then I would, as tutor, pitch in and support them if maybe they'd got something wrong, or if they came across something really interesting, I'd ask them to expand on it, explain it to the rest of the group. And my students overall were really good at building online relationships with each other. But I do think that is down to how it's facilitated, and those boundaries and ground rules from the outset, for me, were key. And if you can get that right, people will usually follow them. And of course, I asked students to engage and ask me what type of ground rules they wanted. When do you want your breaks? How often do you want breaks today? Because it is very difficult to sit for long periods of time just listening to a tutor. I also encourage them, as I say, to take part, but also one-to-one sessions after I'd finished teaching. So, for example, my coaching and mentoring session would be a 4-hour session. We'd have several breaks, and then at the end, I would make myself available for a full hour, so that students could stay online, ask me questions, have a one-to-one tutorial. I made myself available outside of the talk sessions as well. Students could just book an online meet with me. It's worked brilliantly. It's saved a lot of time and a lot of travel for a lot of my students. Just touching on the safeguarding side of it, those boundaries and those behaviours were absolutely essential. Now, bear in mind, I deal mainly with adult learners. It was really important that people understood the behaviours and the language that was expected of them, and also that we were compliant with GDPR. So I would need to monitor the Google Classroom and see what was being recorded in there. Really fortunate, because it pings straight through to the tutor and lets the tutor know when students interact. So I could almost police the Google Classroom to make sure it was appropriate. But I think it's about training and educating learners in how to be an online learner. I think that's also really important. Benefits, wow, I think they're absolutely huge. I think that it enables my students now at Warrington and Vale to fit around their work life, family commitments. We have lots of students who are carers and they want to dial in. We have people who are off sick from work, but you know, they maybe got COVID and they don't want to come in and share it with the classroom, so they can dial in. We're also making it so much more accessible for students who are out of area. So we now have students dialing in. I've got one student dialing in from the Isle of Man on a CIPD programme, which is fantastic. We've got people dialing in from London that want to join our programme with our college because of the way that it's set up. But you've reduced those geographical boundaries and widening participation for students. And I think that's really, really important. The sustainability approach to it. So personal experience, I used to travel around, as I say, 5 campuses in one day. Post-COVID, I would dial in. I would do recorded professional discussions with staff, and we would do it in a Google Meet, and we would record that as evidence for their qualifications. I didn't have to leave my garden office or one of the sites that I would be working from that day. Previously, I could travel to all 5 in one day. So you can imagine less travel, no commuting, less expenses for the college. And for me, it was better for my health and well-being to be able to log in and out. And if a student didn't turn up for a session, nothing was lost. I could just go back to work and do something else in that hour that had been allocated. So it had a lot of benefits for me as the tutor, but I think also for the learners, they're getting a really great experience. And I believe that's down to the skill of the tutor. The tutor has to be able to deliver a good online session, because this is what they want. That's what they're paying for. They're paying good money for courses, and they really want that quality and that experience. So I think there are so many benefits, and I still haven't discovered all of them yet, but I'm getting absolutely brilliant feedback from students. So we've now taken our leadership and management programs to purely online. And I've not yet had a student in the last year and a half that haven't wanted that. We offer face-to-face and hybrid for HR programs. We also offer a pure online of an evening, and that's becoming increasingly popular for people that are working, that can't be released during the day to attend the sessions. So I think there's just so much that works for our learners. But by offering high flex, we're offering both. We're saying to the ones that like to be in a classroom and like that social engagement that you can still be part of that as well. The platforms that we use, mine have mainly been Google, and I'm really comfortable with Google. I know how to use it. I find it easy to use. I find recording the sessions and putting them back into the Google Classroom really easy too. I'm not a massive fan of Teams, and that's only because I didn't use it during lockdown. Our organisation uses Teams for meetings, but Google for teaching, which is quite interesting. There is a large range of platforms out there. We also use Moodle, but that's for the non-interactive teaching where learners log in and almost do distance learning programmes. The recording of sessions is brilliant. However, you need to consider your audience. So I also manage the counselling provision, and a lot of the group discussions that they would have as part of their learning experience, it would be inappropriate to record them because they're talking about very deep and personal experiences. So you really need to think about, what are you teaching, who's your audience, and does everybody agree to you recording that session? So at the beginning of a session, I say, hi everybody, are you all happy for me to record tonight? And I get everybody to shout out and say yes. So it's on that recording, so I've got permissions, and then I post them into the Google Classroom at the end of that session for those to catch up that weren't there. What did we learn from the experiences during COVID? Wow, so much. Do I want to go back to pure face-to-face classroom teaching? No, not for me. I like the high flex, I like hybrid, and I love remote and online learning. So I feel now that I have more to offer as a tutor to my students. I think you have to be very well prepared for it. You have to have everything ready, set to go, and know your kit that you're using, trial and error. But preparation for a good online session is absolutely key. And I use my little cards, my prompter cards, telling me when activities are coming up so I can judge the timing, and I know where I'm up to during the session. Adult learners like to make choices about engagement, and why shouldn't they? Let's offer that to them. Let them choose how they want to engage with the programme. It suits, as I've said, people with caring responsibilities, disabilities or ill health, because it offers up that access to the courses. And also we've had a cost of living crisis, and you know, a lot of our students struggle to find the bus fare. And they don't want to be on campus, that they have, you know, so it's helping them to be able to dial in from home and save some money by not having to, you know, keep the car on the road or fuel. There's so many things. It's greener for me. So considerations moving forward. So you need to make sure that your learners, if you're going to go down the route of offering high flex delivery, are self-disciplined and they have good time management skills. I have been in sessions where students have logged in late, and that can be quite unsettling for the rest of the group, and it can be disruptive. So it's about those boundaries, again, making sure that everyone knows where they're supposed to be at what time. We make a lot of assumptions about digital skills, and actually a lot of my adult learners lack good digital skills. So we do an initial assessment with them before they start the course to ascertain their level of digital engagement and where they may need help. We also have a learning technologist who's able to sit with students on a one-to-one and help support them to learn how to use the technology. We use it in class. Students pick up a Chromebook and walk into class, open up the Chromebook, they're in the classroom, they can see what I can see on the main screen, and we encourage them to use everything within that Google Classroom. The less face-to-face interaction, can affect social skills, and therefore this is why HighFlex lends itself really well, because it's offering the opportunity to those who do want to come in and have that interaction, as well as the ones who are quite happy to be online. So it suits everybody. But you do need to consider the nature of your course. So, for example, practical courses at our college, like, for example, plumbing or hairdressing or carpentry, it will probably only be the theory that you would want to deliver online. They did find ways around it during COVID to do practical stuff, but I do believe that being hands-on in a workshop environment lends itself best to the vocational courses. Just to touch very briefly on my thesis, so I am researching high flex and blended and online and remote delivery as part of my thesis. I'm looking at how can further education colleges further develop the use of this and find ways to support meaningful learner journeys post-pandemic. I believe the rush to go back into the classroom, maybe we're missing something here. What does hybrid and high flex delivery mean for adult professional FE learners? Is it what they really want, or is it something I'm assuming they want? So I'm going to dig deep, and I'm going to interview students and tutors to find out their real true feelings. Where are we now post-COVID? We were thrust into this situation and things have moved on quite dramatically since then. And what happens if we get another COVID? Will we go back to that emergency style, or are we embedding really good practice by offering our programmes as high flex? So I want to know what people are experiencing and whether they're enjoying it and whether it's what they want moving forward. Should we be putting more of our courses online or hybrid or high flex? I've just shared with you here some of the research I've looked at, and I've almost gone back to do a bit of a historical sort of evolution of you know, what was being said in the sector. And it all started really with the Feltag report back in 2014, who reported that our sector should keep abreast of change with digital technology. And I didn't see much evidence of that in March 2020, when we had to literally remote emergency go online. There was lots being written about, there was lots being said about us making our courses more access to them for students and putting more things online, and I'm not convinced that we were actually doing that until we were enforced into doing that during COVID. So I'm also looking at more recent literature. There's lots of journals and articles being published now about people's experiences during COVID, and that will all feed into part of my thesis. So I think I'm bang on time. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope that you've enjoyed listening to some of my experiences of teaching online.
Thank you so much for that, Rachel. That's been very, very interesting. We've got one or two questions, but I think they'll be brought to the panel at the next session. We're now going to go to the breakout rooms. A CAVA member of staff will be popping in to check on you, but if you need us, please just call us to the room. At the top of your screen, there'll be a prompt. Please just click to join. At 2:05, we're going to end the breakout rooms and we'll bring you back to the main room. Please feel free at that point to go for a 10-minute comfort break, and then we'll be starting again at 2:15. So please be back promptly so we can start on time. And we'll see you all in the breakout rooms shortly.
Hi everyone, welcome back after your coffee break, and welcome to our panel on I've forgotten it, on online learning. We have a panel of 5 people with us today who have all had a lot of experience in the field. Our first panel member is Rachel Whitten, who you met earlier. Rachel is the Curriculum Manager for Professional Services, Education and Training at Warrington and Vale Royal College, and has also is also undertaking a doctorate in education, in the education based around hybrid and high flex delivery in FE. Anita, I'd like to introduce Anita Lau, who is our who started in scientific research and made it into FE teaching over 20 years ago, Anita. I'm not sure I should be saying that. She spent 14 years in the FE sector in management and senior leadership, leading diverse multidisciplinary teams, and she is the interim principal and CEO at Craven College up in Skipton, and is our CAVA Council of Members representative for the college. I'd like to say hello to Laura Penny, who's the Deputy Academic Registrar at the University of Suffolk, with responsibility for quality assurance, student complaints and conduct, and the student record system. And she's our Council of Members representative for the University of Suffolk. So hello to Helen Sims. Thank you for joining us, Helen, as well. Been working in FE, I'm not sure I should be saying this, working in FE for 25 years. None of you look that old. So, and has worked in a variety of roles and is currently Programme Manager for Business, Hospitality, Travel and Tourism at the College of West Anglia. And Helen is our Council of Members representative for the college. And finally, I'd like to say hello to Sophie Cobbold, who's our student representative. So we're really pleased to have a student voice here on our panel as well today. And she studied Access to HE diploma in business management at West Suffolk College in Bury St Edmunds. And she's currently in her final year at the University of East Anglia, who's also one of our members, studying business and human resources manager. Just to let you know, we will be, so please, if you've got any questions, we probably haven't got time to take questions verbally today, but if you put your questions in the chat, we'll do our best to get to you today, or we will compile those questions and put together an FAQ response at the end of the session. So I'd now like to hand over to Flora Rafai, who will be looking after this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And just a reminder to everyone who's joined us, if you're not one of the panel members, if I could invite you to turn off your video so that the panel members can come up nice and bright on our screens. And that just means that we can see everyone who's talking. So let's begin. We've had a few great questions that have been submitted ahead of the session by everyone. So thank you everyone who submitted it. So I'll start with the first one, which is, how can teachers ensure safeguarding is still strong with hybrid or high flex teaching, supporting students in the same way as face-to-face teaching? And I'm going to open this up to Anita in the first instance.
Thanks, Flora, and thanks very much for having me on the panel. I'll pick it up with something that Rachel said, actually, which was about is education and training students to be online learners. So that's the first part of it. And really having, for me, really clear guidelines and policies around ICT and acceptable use from that side of things, and being really clear about cyberbullying and making sure that it's referenced in your safeguarding policy. That's really clear, a whole section around online delivery. But then you've got the other side of it, it's just about how do you support students, or how do you recognise students that might be at risk, and how do you provide the support that they need, that sort of that students in colleges get. And I suppose it's making sure that they have access to all the same support, resources. They've got links to all the contacts, who the DSL is, who the safeguarding team is, that you've got safe reporting systems. We have a really good online monitoring system. So if any member of staff or student puts in something that then raises an alert and a concern, maybe they're feeling suicide ideation, or they're feeling overwhelmed, it picks it up and it allows a one-to-one conversation, whether that one-to-one conversation is online or in person. So I think it's making it really clear in terms of the procedures, but the expectations on everybody, and that you don't have any sort of student-to-student, peer-on-peer abuse either.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Anita. And that really touches on something Rachel picked up in her presentation as well, about having those guidelines and having that etiquette ground rules. So I wonder if, Rachel, you wanted to come in there.
I agree with everything Anita's just said. You've got to be very clear with students about those boundaries and those expectations. And I think, for me, with my groups, I have a Google Classroom for each group, and I police what's going on in that Google Classroom. So I check that appropriate language is being used, and that there's nice, good banter amongst the students, and that they're interacting in an appropriate way with each other. I think that's really important. But they are adult learners, and I suspect you may see it different with 16 to 18-year-old learners. But I've encouraged throughout that learners demonstrate that respect for each other and that interaction. I think there is a point there that Anita's just said about, when they are socially distanced, because they're online, it is picking up, isn't it, on any issues, or because you're not seeing them face to face in the classroom. There could be all kinds of things going on behind the scenes. And, I had teenage children that were learning online during COVID, and the isolation was absolutely overwhelming for them. So it's getting that balance right, isn't it? And I think that's where high flex or hybrid comes in, that you are seeing them face to face and allowing them that opportunity. So you've got a nice blend between the two, and that if there are any safeguarding issues that you need to be picking up on, you're noticing that while they're present in class, because you don't see it all on screen.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. Yes, it's being present with your students, regardless of where you're seeing them, whether they're online or in person. Before I move on to the next question, I've opened it up to other panel members to see if anyone wanted to come in on that question.
I don't think I have anything to add. We're very strong. We actually get the students as well to decide their own rules of etiquette as well, and what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. And we recognise that a lot of our students, as we was talking in the breakout room, haven't got officers to sit in, maybe in their bedrooms. So it's much about, we make sure that if that's the case, that cameras, are off if they're on bed, because it's for our protection as much as theirs, because you don't know what they might say and might be doing or whatever that perhaps isn't appropriate for a lesson. So it's about making sure that those safeguards are in place right from day one. And actually, anybody that doesn't support those, the students seem to police it a little bit as well. They don't accept, them breaking their own rules as well. So that always helps.
That's brilliant. I suppose that's where it comes in, of building it with them. They are then invested in seeing those rules take place and holding each other to account for it as well. Perfect. Well, getting on to what I imagine we'll spend a lot of the panel talking about is, we had a great question ahead of time about what tools, apps or platforms have you found which strongly support online delivery? And I'll invite Laura to come in because we've not heard from you yet.
Thank you, Flora, and thank you, colleagues. This has been a really helpful and interesting day from a university perspective, hearing your experiences and sort of doing some predictions maybe around what we'll see in the next couple of years as students progress through. I'm very mindful of not making a recommendation around specifics, but we at the University of Suffolk use a platform called Brightspace from Desire to Learn, D2L. We've been working with them for a number of years, and that was before COVID, so we have some experience of how those tools have worked across a more traditional delivery online, and now something of a blended approach. The tool itself is really helpful, although I would suggest, with a little bit of insight into some others, that it's probably that there's a lot of commonality, isn't there, across some of these leading apps and platforms. And I suppose with that in mind, my reflections maybe are more, rather than on those specifics, but some of the general elements which I think we have found really helpful in our delivery. So I think around the tools that allow you to effectively do sort of little and often through our blended delivery. So different ways of interacting that might be short, sharp things, so quick quizzes, little sort of short videos that might be dropped in, through to more significant pieces of reading or links to something that might be slightly more chunky, I suppose, for students to get their teeth into. And I think that's a really helpful thing that these platforms can help us do, is provide all of that in one place. My hesitation, I suppose, or my awareness that is something more of a challenge in this area is our students are already in a lot of digital spaces. So there was a conversation earlier around some of the social media that they may be using that we may personally not be, or institutionally not be, or maybe we are. And I suppose I'm always mindful of, as soon as you create a specific platform or you use a platform for learning and teaching, we are asking students to add to that digital burden, I suppose, in terms of, what they need to log into, the notifications they need to be on top of. And I think there is a very interesting conversation around what else already is out there? Where are our students already online? And how can we be using those platforms that they're already engaging with to be part of a learning and teaching package or a wider support package? That leaves us with some challenges potentially around measuring engagement and all sorts of things. But I think it's something that we need to probably get to grips with, is going to where our students already are.
That's great. Thank you, Laura. And I'd invite Sophie, our student representative, to come in here and possibly bring your own perspective of where are students currently and what tools or apps have you found useful?
So I find a lot of people use WhatsApp because it's fairly, like, you've not got all your like information on there, you know, like Facebook, you've got like pictures of you, family pictures and all that. You don't have as much like personal information on WhatsApp. So in like uni, we have seminars and then we get ourselves into a group. So I'm in a group on WhatsApp again to talk about like the presentation that we're doing. So yeah, it's a really common platform. When I was a fresher, we would use Facebook. I don't know if they still use Facebook, but you get on a page on there, so then you can join you can find all your flatmates. You can join groups, because I was in a massive business group as well. And then we split off because the way UEA does it is like the BA and the BSc, they have their own modules. So we were in a BA group, and yeah, so it just makes it easy. Like if you're a fresher as well, especially, where is this room? And then you can ask and someone will help you find it. You know, it's good to have platforms where you make these chats. And yeah, those like commuter pages and stuff like that as well. So you can get yourself into where all your little groups are. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Sophia. And did you engage with any of the uni specific platforms that they created, or were you more Facebook and WhatsApp?
I'm not sure that there was really any. There's Blackboard, but that is more, that's got your lectures on there and it'll have a recording on there. But I don't remember there being anything specifically from my journey in university that they gave us like an app to talk to each other on. It was more like, even when I went to the open days, they were like, oh, we just sort of form Facebook groups and things like that, and you just sort of find everybody that way.
That's great. Thank you, Sophie. And I guess that touches on Laura's point about not reinventing the wheel, but using existing platforms that students are on and building into that so that people can feel more engaged as part of their day-to-day life. I wonder, Helen, if you wanted to come in and share some of your experiences of tools or platforms you've used for online delivery.
Yeah, well, like everybody, when we went into lockdown in March 2020, we were just sort of thrown in with what we were given, and the college decided to go down the Zoom route, which was growing exponentially overnight. So we had to have online training, and for us and the students, because we just, you know, something that we weren't familiar with. We used that for about a couple of years, I think, really. But the college policy now has that we're changing over to Teams, because that's now got more options and facilities and features that perhaps Zoom had that Teams didn't have originally. So the college policy is forcing us down the Teams route. But as I was explaining, that a lot of our students are going back to preferring that face-to-face delivery. But what we do is we use things like Menti for quizzes and Jamboards, and like Sophie was saying, sort of online videos and things. And our students, we encourage them to form groups, but everything that they need to access is via our Moodle platform, which we call Learn, and all resources for every lesson is put on there. So if students can't physically get to college, then they can catch up for whatever reason. We have done some sort of blended learning, and that works really well with students that have got health issues, or because some of our students live miles from the college, like everywhere, and it's the only way that they can access. But we're finding that a lot of our students are preferring to go back to face-to-face. But yeah, the college policy is Teams, and that's what we use. pretty much.
That's great. Thank you, Helen. It's good to, I know, Rachel, you mentioned earlier not really liking Teams as much. It's good to have a Teams aficionado, shall I say, on the call as well. And coming to you, Rachel, you've mentioned using Google Classroom. Could you expand a little bit about what functionalities or what other tools you've used to support that, especially HyFlex delivery?
I find Google really easy, and it's only because I've not been trained properly on Teams that I don't like Teams. I think they all have similar sorts of functions. I like Google because it's a one-stop shop. So I can post my assignments and the work the students need to do in there, so I can assess through Google Classroom, as well as the sharing of materials and that interaction. So they don't need a WhatsApp group because they're already able to interact on the chat stream in the Google Classroom. So it's almost like a one-stop shop. They don't need anything else. We upload anything that we do in the classroom. It's really interesting. I love Flipchart, really old-fashioned. So the ones that are in the classroom are doing a mind map on a piece of Flipchart, which I then photograph and upload into the stream. And the people that are online are using a Jamboard, and they're all presenting back to each other, it makes it really interactive. We do Kahoot quizzes, which we run through the Google Classroom as well. We use Google Forms for gauging feedback. You can upload literally anything you want to in there. And we use the Google Meet function within the classroom, so everybody knows where to go to log on. Because I think that was quite confusing at the beginning. People would be sitting in a different meeting to the ones we'd be sat in. Love Jamboard. They're phasing out Jamboard later in the year, so I don't know what the equivalent will be for that. But that's been really useful for me. And we would encourage them to do a Google set of slides. So if they were tasked with an activity, I'd put them into a Google Meet, and they would create a set of Google slides in the Google Meet and then demonstrate that back. So, you know, you can use it in so many different ways. I absolutely love Panopto, but we don't use that at my new college. Instead, we use a package called Loom. And Loom is the same as Panopto. You put your slides or your resources in there, and you can do a session for the students without students being there, and then upload that so they've got activities to do in between lessons. So you're keeping them engaged during, you know, because a lot of our students only come in for 3 or 4 hours a week. They're part-time courses, so you need to keep that engagement when they're not in college as well. So, but I think they're all a bit of a muchness, you know. It's just knowing how to use it properly for me was key. We're still finding functions. We go, oh, I didn't know I could do that. So, yeah, hope that answers your question.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I have just one follow-up question of just what training have each of you gone through to get used to these platforms? So from a college perspective, but then also from a student perspective, what kind of induction do you get? What have you found useful?
We're very lucky. We have a learning technologist, and he does a lot of staff training across the college. He does one-to-ones with literally all staff to help them to understand how to utilise the kit that we've got. A lot of it's trial and error. I put myself into the classroom as a student and as a tutor, so I could see both versions. And then I wrote a guide from a student's perspective, because I was in the classroom as a student, because as a tutor, you do see a different side to it. And I used to send the guide out to students in advance. It was very difficult when I was delivering just one-day courses, getting everybody in the tech and knowing how to use it. That was a real challenge. But, you know, for longer periods, writing a guide and telling people how to use it and little videos on how to, I think that's really helped.
That's great. Thank you, Rachel. And maybe go ahead, Helen.
I was just got to say, we have a department called College Information Systems, and they, bless them, they actually did like 2 or 3 minute videos of each function, a real step-by-step guide, and they get more and more complex the further down the list you go. And that was uploaded to our sort of Moodle platform and our staff shared area, so that staff could try and keep one step ahead of the students, which sometimes it didn't work, you know, but we sharing resources and sharing knowledge, and sometimes I'd get an urgent Teams message, can you join my thing? I've got a problem. So those of us that perhaps had a bit more experience would then just join a group and talk through what the issue was and sort it out. Yeah, so mixed really, but I think it's, as you say, initially we were all started from ground zero, so we all sort of learned together really a little bit.
I could throw it to Sophie to see from the student perspective. Did you receive any induction to things like Blackboard?
So yeah, when you sign up to Blackboard, you're taking my memory back now, but I think it does like a talk through, this is where this is where that is, like a tutorial type thing. But I know specifically at uni we have the IT support, and I know where the building is as well. So you can go physically to them or you can email them. If not, things like if you're living on campus, you've got your flatmates, you can ask them, or people on your course, you can ask them. When I was at college, I might have asked like the tutors and stuff what to do and like things like that. So, and then they might be able to signpost you to the next step. So I know that there's always like those paths available. But I think generally, most students my age, we're used to tech. Things keep changing, we keep adapting, and we're very like on it. So 9 times out of 10, we kind of can just wing it because it's not too dissimilar from things we're already using. So yeah, that's kind of what I'd say.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'm aware I've gone off script, so I'll come back to the questions that we got sent ahead of time. So the final question that we had submitted from those of you who've signed up to today was, how do you ensure a sense of community and engagement amongst students while teaching online? And Anita, I don't know if you're happy to come in first.
Yeah, I'll come in with that. So we've been using Teams for about 3 years now. It's quite funny actually. About 4 weeks before we went into lockdown, before we knew we were going to go into lockdown, there was a whole staff training day where we discussed OneDrive and Teams. And it was, we'll be using this in about 6 months' time and start training. And suddenly lockdown happened and you switch. So I think staff have got very familiar with using Teams, and actually the younger students use it. Schools they're telling us what to do. But one of the great things about Teams, and it's the same with Google, is the chat function. And actually using that chat function at the beginning of the lesson to say, share something that's exciting that's happened to you, so that you get a sense of, because you do when you come into class, don't you? You talk about what program you watched last night, and so it's similar, doing something similar online as well. And certainly with Teams, you can have different channels where you can look at things like that. I think one thing that's really important, I was involved in online delivery probably about 10 years ago, 13 years ago, where we had students all around the country. And one thing that's really important is to try and create an opportunity at least once or twice a year when people would get together and they'd see people in the flesh, whether it's at the end of the course to celebrate or halfway through, again, to just do a touch base. So that used to work really well. So I think it's that what you normally do. Like we don't tend to use WhatsApp with students because of the safeguarding element, but using chat like you would use safeguard and posting things about things. So yeah, that's the sort of stuff that we've been doing. So it's coming up to Christmas. What's your Christmas tree looking like? Or we've had snow here, so actually people posting pictures of snow. And it's the same with staff. We have a staff community page on Teams, so that we have staff that work across North Yorkshire. And they would never meet in person necessarily. So using that as a community page, having a community page for students as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Anita. And that reminds me of during lockdown, what we did in the CAVA team is we had a social every Friday afternoon, and we would all come on and just chat and have that opportunity to connect as people rather than just as colleagues getting on with things in that online setting.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. I think there's always a day, certainly when you've got students in the classroom and those online, trying to make sure you've got that sense of community between those two groups. But it is possible. Most students have a device, they have a mobile phone, so that you can chat on your phone while you're engaging in the lesson and make sure that you're engaging both lots.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anita. Laura, I don't know if you wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's incredibly difficult actually to create these kind of community spaces online, and I would echo your comment, Flora. We did all sorts of things in the early days of COVID to sort of create, you know, times to get together that weren't necessarily strictly work related. And I think what we found was that, and I think there's a comment in the chat that uses the word fatigue, that actually even with those kind of things, it did become a bit kind of, oh, not another quiz or whatever. And I can imagine that that experience was probably quite similar for our students if we were using the same techniques and tools. So I think something around echoing as far as you can real life situation, which would be we might all meet for a coffee every Friday, but shall we go somewhere else, or you know, go for a walk instead or something. So that kind of variety, and how do we sort of emulate that in those digital spaces, I suppose is kind of interesting to think about. The other thing that sort of struck me around some of this is we've been having some quite challenging conversations in the HE context recently around attendance, so physical attendance in the classroom, and why students might not choose to come along. And it's been quite refreshing to hear some quite bold statements from some of our colleagues saying, well, do we not need to be slightly introspective about this? And are people not attending because our teaching is not good enough, in the sense of, you know, is it actually not engaging? Is it not exciting to be here? Is it not, you know, encouraging people to come in and learn? And I wonder if there's something similar actually around our online spaces, that if they are creative and engaging, will people naturally be there? And if they aren't engaging, is there something for us to think about? Is actually, are we doing enough, being creative enough, rather than assuming there's something, you know, up with those individuals that might not be logging in? Is it the offer that's wrong? And what more, or what could we do differently to attract people in, I suppose?
That sounds like very bold conversations to be having in the institution, and wonderful that they're taking place. We should always challenge ourselves to think beyond our assumptions and have that sort of box 2 thinking that Ben was saying earlier about challenging the values and making sure they're still serving us going forward. Helen, I don't know if you wanted to jump in as well on creating that sense of community.
Very similar to what Anita was saying, really. Our course directors, when the groups have settled down, they set up a Teams group. It's standard practice for us now to have Teams open all day, every day. And if students want to contact us just to ask a question, or can we have a meet, or I'm struggling with this, then they just message us. So it's become the norm now, whereas it used to be, you know, an email which you may not see because you got 400 other emails sat there. When you got a team, like now, I'm looking at the bottom of my screen, I've got 4 messages waiting for me to look at. When we have a break, I might just glance at them. So it's just that norm, and students really like that. But I agree, it's about as well getting together. We have a my cutest pet competition, which the students then may or may not. And if they haven't got a pet, then I've seen some quite creative, like stuffed dogs dressed up with the little hats on and different things, so that they still feel that they're taking part in this community challenge that's going on. So that's a fun way, of keeping them engaged. And also then you've got the accessibility, I think, of the lecturers and student voice. I talk to my students all the time, and they really like that, the fact that they could send me a message or send anybody a message and they'll get a response, you know, as soon as humanly possible. So I think that's worked really well for us.
Can I just come in there, Flora? I think one of the things that I've sort of been picking up the last few years is around neurodiverse learners, and actually for them being online and being able to communicate via chat is much more accessible to them than being in a classroom and having to talk where they can feel quite anxious about it. So actually having an online forum and using chat is a better way. They feel more included in that rather than in a classroom physical environment.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Anita. I'm conscious of time, but I do want to give the final word to our student rep, and to always make sure that we have that student voice having that final say. So Sophie, from your perspective, what has helped with creating that sense of community engagement with the more online aspects of your course?
Thank you. I think, yeah, it's carrying on kind of from what Anita was saying, that sometimes like being on like this sort of environment where we're on a video chat, like I'm sat in my room right now, I can see a million things happening, like I can hear something from downstairs, like there's a lot of distractions, I think, from the student perspective, because we haven't got like an office we can go and sit in. We're sat somewhere in the corner of the house trying to get away from all the noise, but there's still that noise. So especially for me, I find that I like taking information better if it's written down. So if there's a message in a chat talking about, like, I don't know, a presentation or a piece of work we've got to do, I can always say I'm not doing it right now. When I go and do that piece of work, I can scroll back and say, oh, this is what someone said about it. Oh, this is like a good website to use, you know. I need that kind of written down, so when I actually have time to go and do the piece of work, I've got that there. But yeah, I think it's very difficult being online. Like Chris was saying in the chat I saw, we were the COVID year, so it was really difficult anyways, because it was like full on in person and then it was online all of a sudden, and like it was a big change because we were all used to seeing each other's faces every day, and then all of a sudden we weren't. But it was good that we were in a chat because we could just send things in there, and also another chat function, I don't know if it's on all of the platforms, is that you can do a voice note. So if you're not very like confident typing out a massive message, you can just like record your voice saying it. I think that works better for some people because of, again, like the levels of where you're good at and what you're not so strong at, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a difficult thing, I think, and there's never any right or wrong answer to how to create it. It's just sort of just playing with things and seeing what sticks, really, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sophie, and thank you to all of our panelists for joining us. I feel like we could have talked for another about hour or so about this. It's a great to have your insights and your experience with us. So before I hand back to Barbara to introduce the next session, I just want to again say a huge thank you to our panelists, and to remind everyone who is joining us to please fill in your feedback form, which George has just put in the chat. I will be in a few minutes, when it's my closing remarks, picking out 2 winners at random for those who's completed it. So there is a personal incentive to fill it in as well. So I'll now hand back to Barbara.
Let's roll back in seamlessly. Thanks very much. Thanks everyone for your questions in the chat as well. It's really good to hopefully we've responded to some of those questions. It's really nice to hear your messages. We're now going to go into our final breakout rooms. So again, just bear with us. You'll be your notification will come up and you'll be sorted out. So if you need anything whilst you're in that room, just let us know. But we'll be popping in to see you shortly.
Okay, welcome back everybody. We've come to one of the final parts of the day, and in my opinion, it's one of the best. So it's now time for our CAVA Awards. For any of you that don't know or who are new to CAVA, each year we highlight students for 2 awards. These awards being academic achievement and outstanding commitment to study. This year, like many others, we've received a range of incredible nominations for students who have overcome difficulties and achieved incredible things. I'd like to take a minute to thank everybody who nominated a student, and also acknowledge the students who were nominated. On behalf of the 7 of us at CAVA, it's been really difficult to choose a winner. For each award, we have chosen a winner and a runner-up, who, along with their tutors who nominated them, will give a short speech. I would now like to pass over to Flora to announce the winners and the runners-up of the CAVA Awards 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And I'd like to also say a huge thank you to everyone who nominated a student for the awards. As every year, all the nominations were absolutely excellent and really demonstrated both the resilience and dedication of all of our students. And despite having so many worthy nominations, the 4 students I'm about to introduce still managed to stand out. So I'd like to start by first celebrating our students with outstanding academic achievement. Our runner-up this year is Emily Sargison, who completed an Access to HE diploma in humanities at Truro and Penrith College. Unfortunately, Emily is not able to join us, but her nominating tutor, Ewan, recorded a short video for us to explain why he nominated her and tell us a little bit more about Emily. So I'll hand over to Georgia to bring up that video.
Greetings from Cornwall. My name's Ewan Beattie. I'm tutor on the Access to Humanities course at Truro College. Apologies for not joining you live, but many thanks for the opportunity to tell you about Emily Sargison, who I understand is the runner-up for the Outstanding Commitment to Study Award. Emily joined us on Access with a view to studying psychology at university. As is often the case with Access students, her GCSEs were disrupted and she was unable to continue into the sixth form. She therefore sought work in a supermarket. Clearly academically able, she proved very diligent from the outset and swiftly made good the gaps in her skills and knowledge. She achieved distinction grades in her initial assessments, despite being away from education for many years. And it became immediately apparent that Emily was reading extensively around the subject, which caught the attention of one of my colleagues, who previously had been a lecturer in the University of Surrey's psychology faculty. However, this effort made by Emily was also evident in history, politics and law, all of which she found deeply challenging. Though through hard work and always acting on feedback, Emily maintained the distinction grades throughout her programme and ended up with a perfect score. Now, a clean sweep of distinction grades in itself is far from unique, but there were 2 particular attributes that marked Emily out as an exceptional student. Despite being naturally shy, Emily continuously supported her peers academically and pastorally throughout the programme. She mentored those less able and nurtured those with personal issues, done, as always, with a genuine concern and in a very discreet manner. Then, secondly, having achieved distinction grades at the time of her UCAS submission for all her units, Emily was inexplicably rejected from her first choice institution. Now, rather than accepting this, she contacted the admissions team and made a case based on her academic potential. And I'm delighted to report that the university in question changed their mind and admitted her to their BSc psychology degree. Modest, exceptionally hardworking, positive, empathetic, and inspirational, Emily represents the very best of Access student stories, and through her support of others, wholly represents the Access ethos. We're therefore delighted that her efforts have been recognised in this way. Thank you very much, and congratulations, Emily.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much to Ewan for sending that short video. And now I'm delighted to welcome and introduce our winner for this year, who is Sophie Clark, who studied a Access to HE diploma in science at Nottingham Trent University. And I'll hand over first to Julia Mumby, who nominated Sophie, and then I'll hand over to Sophie herself.
Hi, everybody. We were absolutely delighted when we were informed that Sophie had been successful in achieving the award for outstanding achievement. She absolutely excelled throughout all of her studies with us. I can honestly say in my 17 years of teaching in further education that I haven't come across a student as high in terms of her academic ability and attainment that Sophie achieved while she was with us. Sophie, as with many of our Access students, came to us after working several years in a job that she wasn't particularly passionate about. I think she may correct me, but I'm sure it was at the finance department at Audi that Sophie was working at before she came to us. And she'd faced some significant challenges at home and some really prior negative experiences in college when she should have been supported through some circumstances that were completely beyond her control. The team can actually remember Sophie arriving on an open day to talk to them about the Access to HE course with us. And she was cautious, reserved, very, very shy. And one of our team members spent a long time talking to her about the Access course and whether it would be right for her. When she started with us, it was like seeing a different person when she walked through the door. She was enthusiastic. She was so excited to be studying an Access course, and she really threw herself into her studies. So we really saw a transformation in Sophie when she started to get into the area that she was feeling particularly passionate about. She fully immersed herself into her college life. She became a course rep and became well respected by students and staff alike. She worked extremely hard from day one, achieving distinctions in every single assessment that she undertook. And it's even towards the very end of the course, when she received a distinction, she was always surprised and couldn't believe that she'd actually achieved that grade. And even though you said to her, Sophie, look, every grade's been a distinction, it was still a shock to her, and she was still absolutely thrilled about it. I remember particularly one moment when I was assessing a presentation for her for a reproduction assignment, and the quality of work was outstanding. It was like watching a HE lecturer delivering the content on reproduction. And I remember saying to her at the end of the presentation, after sitting there in stunned silence, saying to her that she needed to speak to HE because they would give her a job. She was fantastic. We're absolutely delighted that we've taught Sophie and been involved in her experience and her journey, and we know that she'll be successful in whatever she goes on to do. And well done, Sophie, for everything you've achieved so far.
Thank you, Julia. And now I'd like to invite Sophie to come on and share her story.
There we go. Hello, everyone. Okay, so yeah, for me, in the space of 9 months, I managed to successfully complete the Access to Higher Education Science course at Nottingham Trent University through the exam board CAVA, and I managed to exceed my expectations by gaining distinctions across the board. And I dedicated most of my time studying and learning as much as I could to get the most out of the course, and any work that was due had my undivided attention and dedication. It's enabled me to actually go into higher education where I am now and be able to study biochemistry with the aim to eventually go into research and development. The content that was delivered by the tutors, it was all so relevant and well structured, and it bridged the gap as well between further education and higher education, regardless of how long one has actually been out of education for. And for me, it was 15 years, so it was quite a while. And it's proven to be an invaluable foundation as well of knowledge, which I'm now building on as well. The taught course that was approved by CAVA, it was structured so clearly, and it just gave myself and others the opportunity to actually see what we'd be learning and when we'd be learning it, and of course a very clear assignment brief as well to know what was expected of us as well, including the additional resources. Each assignment when we completed it, we also had the completion of the topic exam or assignment, which made it a lot easier as an immature student rather than thinking, oh gosh, there's an end of year exam. So it was really helpful and far less daunting of an approach as well, which has helped be able to boost the confidence in terms of the gradings that we'll be facing here in higher education, as we've already got some exams upcoming, which is nerve-wracking to say the least. The tutors, Emma, Beth, Kathy with A, Kathy with a C, and Julia, they're an absolute asset to education, and also women in science as well. At any point, if I was unsure of anything, I just bugged the life out of them, and they always made sure they had the time for me. It was never a bother, and they had the patience of a saint and did it with a smile. So my experience overall of the access to higher education, it's been wonderful, and to be studying something I actually enjoy and to be around people with similar ages and interests, and the tutors' motivation and kindness, they were all I needed to succeed. And it's a period in my life that I will reflect back on, and it will be constantly something I'll remind myself that how well I did and also what I'm capable of. So I just want to thank all the brilliant tutors that helped me actually get to where I am now. And of course to CAVA for also choosing me as the Outstanding Academic Achievement winner for my region. I'm truly honoured and thankful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you for sharing that. It is one of the highlights of our year to hear so many wonderful comments about the course. I'm so glad it's helped you achieve what you want to achieve. Turning now to our next award, and keep those applauds and celebrations coming for everyone. It's now time to celebrate our students who have shown outstanding commitment to study throughout their courses. Our runner-up this year is Sherry Shepherd, who also completed the Access to HE Diploma in Science at Nottingham Trent. So I'll hand back to Julia to give us an overview of Sherry, and then I'll hand it over to her.
I don't know if I'm ready for this. I feel a little bit emotional after seeing Sophie. It's lovely to see you, Sophie, and well done. But Sherry, what can I say about Sherry? In honesty, there'd never be enough words to describe Sherry's dedication, her hard work, and her commitment to achieving. Every day is challenging for Sherry due to conditions that she has with her health, and she also juggles that with being a parent, and then obviously she was completing her access studies alongside. But when you meet her, you would never ever realise that she was going through those challenges. She takes absolutely everything in her stride and goes out of her way to support others while she's doing it. She completely remains focused on achieving the very best that she can do. And despite tackling those serious health problems, was such a dedicated student. I remember, and the team remember one particular situation where Sherry had been in hospital, and she actually discharged herself to come into college because she didn't want to miss her lectures. We did send her back and say, no, go back to college, you go back to hospital, but you need to be healthy enough to be here. But that just really shows how dedicated she was to achieve the best that she possibly could. She didn't want to miss a day of her education. She gave 100% effort every day. She never gave up. She was always one of the first ones in the library, often at 8 o'clock in the morning working, and then one of the last ones to leave. And we were just astounded with the lengths that she'd go to make sure that she just achieved the best that she could. We know that for Sherry, becoming a qualified dietitian was something that she wanted to strive to achieve, and we're really, really proud of her and grateful that we've witnessed her, in her journey towards that, and congratulate her on getting her place at university because it's well deserved.
Thank you very much, Julia, and thank you for nominating her. I now would like to bring Sherry Shepherd to share her story as well. So welcome, Sherry.
Hey, I thought I'd give you all a Christmas scene as it's a bit cold outside today. God, I can say so much. First, I can't believe I'm at the University of Nottingham doing dietetics and nutrition. It's been my dream, and I truly wouldn't have got there without Julie, Emma, both Catherines, CAVA, and wow, what an experience. At my current uni now, it's totally different to the teaching methods on my access course. It makes me realise every day how lucky I was with the support that I got, and the teachers gave me so much motivation every single day to come in and try my best. Because it's very hard at my current university, you just don't get that support. And in my access course, we were quite small and we were all very, very close. And I think that helped me out a lot. But I will never, ever forget being allowed onto the access course, studying and getting on to uni, because I wouldn't have been able to do it without everybody helping me. And it was such a fun environment. Like the teachers made it very fun every day. It was hard work, but it made it easy for me to understand. And I can't thank my course, the teachers, enough for supporting me and helping me. I'm going to get a bit emotional now, and I'm honoured to get this nomination as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I'd like to now introduce our winner of the Outstanding Commitment to Study. And our winner this year is Danny Svensson, who completed the Access to HE Diploma in Land-Based Studies at Bishop Burton College. And I'll first hand over to Kate Stevenson, who nominated Danny, and then I'll hand over to Danny himself.
Hello. So I'm not entirely sure that I can live up to some of the amazing speeches that we've heard so far today. And I'd like to say congratulations to everybody else that has been awarded. There have been some outstanding accolades given by your tutors. But I would like to introduce Danny to you. So we are particularly proud of Danny. He did so well on his Access course this year. He won't mind me telling you that when he started the course, he was the most mature student in the group. He wasn't entirely sure he'd fit in with some of the younger students, but it didn't faze him at all. He started to get on with the group quite well, and then realised that Danny's forte was not computers. We laughed and joked quite a lot that his level of ability meant that he could turn them on, but opening or finding a Word document, never mind formatting and layout, was just something that Danny sort of couldn't do initially. He worked really hard. He got himself to a point where he could even create graphs on Excel, which, you know, again, we laughed and joked about. He kept working really hard. He managed to get grips on academic writing as well. So it seems like he started out really well. You know, he's done quite well with this. But then unfortunately, about 2 months into the course, Danny did have some issues at home, which sort of did affect his ability to attend and focus when he was here. Again, Danny won't mind me sort of saying that his marriage broke down. He was homeless for a little while, and then also sort of didn't have his job either. But even during all of those times, Danny still managed to keep his attendance up above 90%. It was actually above our college target of 95. He was still visiting our learning mentors, still submitting his work and getting merits and distinctions. Again, something that Danny never thought he'd get. The look on his face when he got his first distinction was, you know, something that, you know, I still sort of look back and you know, it makes me smile. He did try to get sort of back to everything going on, get back on track with everything. He had a bit of a positive month, and then sort of things went downhill again. And then it started to affect his sort of his mental health, because he couldn't afford to get to college. He didn't qualify for our bursaries. No matter what Danny did, he was adamant that he was attending college, adamant that he was going to get the grades to get onto the BSc in conservation, because that was exactly what he wanted to do. He started to apply for jobs, but then couldn't get them because he was studying on Access, and, you know, the hours just didn't work. But he managed to keep himself motivated. He managed to keep achieving those merits and distinctions. And not only did he do that, he then supported other people on the course that were struggling to keep up, other people that were having personal problems. You know, he supported them while he was going through all of this. And then we found out sort of at the end of the year, just as we were getting grades, that not only had Danny got the grades to get onto the BSc in conservation, in which he is now excelling in, but he also managed to get a job in one of the zoos that he'd applied to, which again was sort of a huge feat. So I just want to say really big well done to Danny. As a college, we are very, very proud of you. We are delighted to have had you as a student, and I can't speak highly enough of the commitment that you have, you know, shown towards the course and to Access. Well done, and keep it up.
Thank you so much, Kate, for that wonderful introduction. And I'll hand over to Danny to share your story.
Hi everyone. My cat's joined us for this. I'm crazy nervous. I apologise. Not once did I expect to get where I've got to through this. It's been, well, crazy. Like a few weeks into the course, everything went wrong. It did. I had nowhere to live. I had no money. All I had was coming to college and doing my course because it's the only thing that was still sort of, well, secure, I suppose. It was hard. I went through, kept trying to get through, kept going. Kate was incredible. She will start crying probably shortly. Yeah, everyone on the course was brilliant. They all helped me. I couldn't help much with anything apart from like making them laugh, I suppose. I'm like, this is good to me. I've got a speech up and a camera. This is top quality stuff. But thank you for nominating me. Thank you for everything, really, and congratulations to everyone else. I'm sorry I'm keeping this short and sweet, but I'm terrible at things like this. Thank you, honestly.
Thank you so much, Danny. And please, everyone, join me in applauding both Danny and all of our fantastic winners and runners-up. It is truly an honour to share their stories at the conference. It is the highlight of the office. I had to nip next door to get a tissue during during those speeches, actually, where everyone else is sitting in the team. Our students have really demonstrated the very best qualities of all of our Access to HE cohorts, and we wish each and every one of them all the very best with their current studies and their future successes. And I would like to encourage all of you to just take a moment to think about the students that you have on the course this year and to start to consider who amongst them are already demonstrating these outstanding commitments to study and academic achievement. And we'll start to welcome nominations at the end of this academic year for the CAVA 24 awards. As we now start to draw to a close, I'd like to invite all of you to complete the feedback form that Georgia's been sharing throughout the day. I believe she'll be sharing it in the chat box in a moment as well. As I mentioned at the start, I'll be picking 2 people at random from those who complete the feedback form for our prize. I'll be announcing that in a couple of moments, so do please fill in your feedback forms in the next couple of minutes. I now have the fun job of trying to summarize an entire conference in just a few minutes. And I'd like to first start by thanking all of our speakers, our panel members, and our students for sharing their time and thoughts with us today. Thank you all to each and every one of you for joining us and engaging in our discussion groups. It sounds like you've had some really good in-depth conversations, so I hope you found the day as thought-provoking as I have. As I sort of reflect on what has been coming out, I've got a few hastily written notes in front of me. I think what's really come out from the whole day has been the quote that Ben started us off with from Charles Darwin about the survival is for those who are most adaptable. And so I think what both artificial intelligence, online delivery, and other forms of EdTech are really challenging us to do is to really go back to the intention of the qualification and go back to our intended learning outcomes that we want all of our students to come away from so that we can set them up for success in further education, higher education, and the world of work beyond. And to make sure that as these tools become more ingrained into our delivery and into our lives more broadly, that we design everything around the existence of these. So looking at artificial intelligence, how can we start to redesign our teaching resources, our assessments, and our delivery practices with that recognition that AI is now that assistant, it's now that companion that's going to be with us going forward. And how can we use that to help increase our creativity and innovation whilst also reducing our workload and finding more efficient, effective ways forward, both for students and for our course teams and provider teams that support them more broadly. And to do this, we need to all learn how to use these tools and the principles of how to use them responsibly and appropriately, so that we don't delve into that sort of cheating line, but stay on the side of using it to enhance learning and delivery. And it was really useful to get that recommendation from Ben about the prepare and chat methods. And I also like to just take a moment to remind you about the CAVA AI guidance that we have around how you can use AI in supporting your students and how they should be considering using it for their qualification as well. And I found that a lot of the principles coming out of our artificial intelligence talk was mirrored in online and in online delivery around how it's really important that we always come back to giving students the flexibility to choose how they engage and to what extent they use the various EdTech tools that are available. So making sure we build in opportunities for them to learn about the platform and learn about how this can help to be more accessible for them, especially for students who have other commitments outside of their studies, such as care responsibilities or work, or who may be living with various health conditions as well. So recognizing where online delivery could give us that flexibility and combine the benefits, especially in a high flex model, the benefits of in-person with the benefits of a more accessible online delivery. And like with AI, with online delivery, the fundamental thing is to make sure that we put those ground rules in place and that we're very intentional and focused with what we're doing, so nothing gets taken for granted. So we have those principles for etiquette, for how to overcome digital fatigue, building and monitoring and safeguarding. But fundamentally, at the end of it all, how do we use these tools to enhance the human relationships and communities that education is so strong at creating? So whilst we've talked about a variety of tools, and I'm sure throughout the chat there's been a lot more comments as well of different things people are using, I think what I'm taking away very much is making sure that we're intentional, we're creative and innovative, but that we keep that human relationship and that human community at the center of everything that we do with our qualification and with these tools going forward. So please do put in your other thoughts and reflections if you feel like I haven't missed, if I have missed anything that's come away from the day. It'd be great to hear what you're taking away. But as I start to close, I would invite us to celebrate ourselves with our traditional prize draw. And I'm going to ask my colleague to let me know who the winners have been selected. And my very glamorous assistant has just passed me 2 pieces of paper. And in the spirit of lifelong learning, we will be awarding 2 book vouchers to the winners, and we'll contact you after the conference to arrange delivery. So I will, with no further ado, look at the first one. So our first winner, who's been selected at random, is Janet Cross, and our second winner is Sam Donovan. So congratulations to you both. I hope the little voucher is a fun Christmas treat as we start to come into December. And I'd like to now just draw us to a close with one final thank you. And I would like to say a huge thank you to the incredible CAVA team that you've seen throughout the day, to Barbara, Emily, Emma, Georgia, Jackie, and Nork. You all work tirelessly with our members to assure the highest quality of our pre-access and access to HE diplomas, and you really promote the outstanding achievements of our students. And I continue to feel privileged each and every day to work with you. So thank you so much for all that you do. And please, can I see some more emoji love for the fantastic CAVA team that we have? I love that. We need to have that in every conference. So thank you once again for joining us today. On behalf of the whole CAVA team, we wish you the very best for the rest of this term, and we hope you have a wonderful and restful festive break. And we look forward to working with you in the new year as well. So thank you. Hopefully no one has a long commute now as they turn off their screens and go to the sofa. Have a lovely rest of your day, and we'll see you again at a future event. Thank you so much, everyone.